Chapter 159. Captain, Yoluin is dead. That fellow killed him. A crewman on the invincible Iron Seed reminded Victorian Greyjoy loudly. Even though what he wanted to do the most right now was to turn the ship around and escape like the other ships in the fleet, considering the character of his captain and the harsh means of dealing with traitors, he suppressed the fear in his heart and stayed. However, he dared to guarantee that if the dragon in the sky flew towards the warship, he would definitely turn around and jump into the sea immediately. All the bullsh T rules, punishments, and the Greyjoy family could go to hell. His life was more important. In fact, he wasn't the only one with such thoughts. More than 90% of the sailors on the deck had similar thoughts. After all, the residents of the Iron Islands weren't kind men and women. Having grown up in a harsh environment, they were more realistic than anyone else in Westeros. They would never give up their lives for so-called noble reasons. Victorian Greyjoy was clearly aware of this as well, which was why he gripped his beloved axe tightly. If anyone dared to start a rebellion, he wouldn't hesitate to chop off their heads. Of course, he was more worried about the fellow who had just killed his brother than the crewman he was familiar with, especially the dragon hovering in the sky. It was like a sharp sword hanging over their heads, ready to fall and destroy the entire fleet at any time. No captain would think that their ship could outrun a dragon soaring in the sky. Just as all the Ironborn were getting more and more nervous, Zhang Chung suddenly made a strange movement on the deck of Serenity. Then, he disappeared in an instant. The next second, he appeared right next to Victorian. This man, who had always been known for his steadiness, seriousness, and loyalty to his duty, instinctively raised his axe and chopped down. But before the axe could touch Zhang Cheng's clothes, a ball of orange flame spread out in all directions with Zhang Cheng as the center. The scalding heat forced Victorian to take a few steps back. Even a large portion of his hair, beard, and body hair was burned off. When the flames completely disappeared, Zhang Cheng calmly threw away the sulfur powder in his hand that was used to assist in the spellcasting. He smiled and comforted her. "Relax, I'm not here to kill you. I just hope to reach some kind of consensus with you." "Reach a consensus?" Victorian frowned, his eyes filled with vigilance. "That's right. If I'm not wrong, the target of your attack this time should be the Shield Archipelago and the River Bend area, right?" Zhang Cheng ignored the nervous sailors with sharp blades in their hands and went straight to the point. "Yes. What are you trying to do?" Victorian was clearly more rational than Yoluin. He quickly realized that the enemy had no intention of killing him, much less destroying the fleet that the Iron Islands were so proud of. "It's simple. I think you can completely bypass the Shield Archipelago and launch a sneak attack on the richer old town. As an ally, I can provide some additional help to ensure that you're not discovered by anyone in advance. As long as you swear to kill all the direct descendants of House Hyder after conquering the old town." Zhang Cheng quickly stated his conditions. As the second most powerful house in the River Bend area, House Hyder was undoubtedly a huge obstacle to him, who wanted to usurp the authority of the area. Moreover, House Hyder also supported the City of Knowledge and was determined to build a world without dragons, magic, or supernatural powers. From a certain perspective, they were natural enemies to him, who wanted the world to develop towards a magical civilization. Zhang Cheng had originally planned to slowly get rid of this threat after he took over House Tyrell's inheritance. However, he now had a new idea, which was to use the Ironborn's love for plunder to destroy his foundation. Victorian stared at the young man in front of him for a full minute before asking with a cold smile, "Since you want to form an alliance with me, why did you kill my brother?" Zhang Cheng shrugged helplessly. "I'm sorry. I think you should know that Yoluin's brain isn't normal. To be more precise, he's already gone mad. I don't like to work with a lunatic, especially one who you never know what crazy idea he'll come up with next. However, you're different. You're a mature leader and also someone who does your job well. You won't go back on your word so easily. Also, I know you don't like Yoluin and even wanted to kill him for a period of time. You should be happy that he's dead because you can take over the power and become the new king of the Ironborn. But he's still my brother. You have to give me an explanation." Victorian insisted with a serious expression. "All right. Please state your conditions." Don't go overboard. Zhang Cheng extended his right arm and made an inviting gesture. Victarion hesitated for a moment before pointing at the huge dragon horn on the deck of Serenity and saying, "I want the dragon binder." "No, change it." Zhang Cheng rejected the other party's request without even thinking about it. He wouldn't hand over such a powerful magical item to an enemy who might turn on him at any time. Even though there were only 3 dragons in the story of the Song of Ice and Fire, who knew where in the world there would be dragon eggs hatching after the arrival of the Crimson Comet? If the enemy found a few and tamed them, it would be a huge problem. "All right, I want you Luan's armor." Victarion quickly changed to his second condition. Obviously, he knew that Zhang Cheng wouldn't hand over the dragon horn, so he purposely used the first condition as bait in exchange for the second condition. After all, Yuluan claimed that the armor he was wearing was real Valyrian steel armor. According to the current value, it was worth an entire kingdom. It was said that a person wearing Valyrian steel armor would be invulnerable on the battlefield. Other than the equally sharp Valyrian steel sword, even a sharp spear wouldn't be able to leave a single mark on it. Victarion had long coveted this armor. Now that he had the chance, he naturally wouldn't let it go. "Armor?" Zhang Cheng paused for a moment. He turned around and glanced at the corpse on the deck not far away. He immediately noticed the unique patterns on the surface of the armor. He smiled and nodded. "No problem. Deal. It's yours." "Really?" Victarion couldn't believe that he'd achieved his goal so easily. Chapter 160. Perhaps in the eyes of the original inhabitants of the Song of Ice and Fire, weapons made of Valyrian steel were unparalleled treasures. Even nobles like Lannister and Tyrell would yearn for a Valyrian steel sword as a family heirloom. As for armor, it only existed in legends. No one had ever seen what a real Valyrian steel armor looked like. Even Yuluan couldn't be sure if the armor he found in the ruins was Valyrian steel. He could only make a judgment based on its appearance and toughness. But in Zhang Cheng's eyes, the so-called Valyrian steel was just a special alloy that had been tempered with special magic. Its toughness couldn't even compare to Azeroth's mithril. The only thing worth praising was the beautiful patterns on it. Therefore, while he might be interested in the smelting process of Valyrian steel, he definitely wouldn't be interested in a mere armor or weapon. Soon, Yuluan's body was returned to his brother along with his armor. However, the Serenity was kept as a spoil of war. Although the ship's ram had a large hole in it, the main structure wasn't too damaged. It could still be used after some simple repairs. Furthermore, there was still a large amount of treasures that Yuluan had plundered when he was exiled, as well as some small items that he had found while exploring the ruins of Valyria. Before he could confirm whether there were any magical items in there, Zhang Cheng would not hand them over to anyone. Of course, Victarion Greyjoy was also very clear about this, so he didn't dwell on it too much. After taking the armor that he coveted for himself, he immediately put away his vigilance and said in a slightly gloomy tone, "Now, you can start talking about the plan to attack the old town. If the success rate is above 50%, I can agree to a temporary alliance with you, but only this time." "Haha, no problem. My plan is very simple. First, I'll hire a group of pirates to attack the Shield Islands and attract the attention of the Tyrell and Hyder families. Then, you'll lead the Ironborn to go around the watchtower and directly land on the black market near the beach. When the time comes, I'll arrange for someone to take care of you and let you go around the city walls and enter the old town. I'm sure you're more experienced than I am." Zhang Cheng explained the first half of the plan. As for the second half, he wouldn't tell anyone. In fact, in his plan, the fleet of the Iron Islands was also cannon fodder. They were used to deplete and weaken the power of the nobles in the Riverbend area. Even if they could survive the counterattack of the nobles, he would personally kill them to silence them. Victarion obviously knew nothing about this. To be precise, he had been raised to be a loyal guard since he was young, a guardian of the family, and not a qualified leader. In a way, he was surprisingly similar to Ed Stark. Once he was caught in the vortex of power, there was no way he would be able to survive the various schemes. The serious-looking man lowered his head and pondered for a while. Then, he immediately questioned, "Can you really bypass the tall walls of the old town and let us directly enter the inner part of the town?" As far as I know, the reason why the Old Town hasn't been attacked by pirates for so many years, apart from having a powerful fleet, is that they have built a complete defense system. Any ship that approaches the town must first pass by the ballistic cannons on both sides of the walls. I don't want to see countless stone pellets flying at me when I get close. Don't worry, I've made all the preparations. What you need to do is to follow my plan. Do you understand? As the last word left his mouth, Zhang Cheng suddenly took out the pocket watch that could affect a person's mind. Instantly, a strange energy hit Victorian, who was caught off guard. After a few seconds, his eyes began to glaze over, as if he had fallen into a state of sleepwalking. Then, he muttered to himself, "Understood. I'll do as you say. Very good. Now take your fleet and leave. I'll arrange for someone to contact you later." With that, Zhang Cheng quickly put away his pocket watch and left the invincible iron seed before the sailors on the deck noticed anything. Less than a minute after he left, Victorian shuddered and regained consciousness. He roared at the clueless sailors. "Idiots! What are you waiting for? Put up the flag immediately. Get all the captains here. I'm taking you to the richest port in the 7 kingdoms. Old Town." What? Loot Old Town? One of the sailors couldn't hide his surprise and joy. There was probably no one in Westeros who didn't know about this huge port city that had a long history and had never been touched by the flames of war. There was no one who didn't know about the prosperity and wealth within. If someone could successfully loot Old Town, they would immediately become the richest person in the world. For the Iron Seeds who had lived in barren lands since they were young, even a small part of Old Town would be enough for them to live comfortably for the rest of their lives. For a moment, everyone chose to forget about the dragons circling in the sky and Yoluin's headless corpse. They began to fervently discuss the possibility of success. Looking at the bustling scene on the opposite ship, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but smile and sigh. What's that saying again? Oh, right, people die for wealth, just as birds die for food. There's nothing better than naked profit to arouse the greed in humans. My lord, we've followed your orders and moved all the gold and silver from Serenity into our hold. What do you think we should do with this ship? Eric appeared out of nowhere and asked in a low voice. Leave 10 sailors and 30 soldiers behind, as well as the captives from Serenity. Slowly repair the ship. Once it's fixed, return immediately. Remember, move quickly. We'll set sail for our destination in half an hour. I don't have time to waste on waiting, Zhang Cheng replied without hesitation. As you wish. Eric placed a hand on his chest and bowed. He hurriedly turned around and shouted loudly for the sailors to use the oars and slowly separate the 2 ships. Those who stayed behind began to repair the huge hole in Serenity's hull. The rest quickly hung up the sails and braved the wind and waves as they sailed towards the location of the ruins of Valyria. Seeing that everything had returned to normal, Zhang Cheng immediately left the deck and entered the captain's cabin. He couldn't wait to study the powerful enchantment on the dragon's horn, as well as the dozens of mysterious runes engraved on it. Chapter 161. There was no doubt that before the advent of the steam age, sailing on the endless seas with only sails and oars was a rather boring task. It was so boring that the captain had to constantly torment the sailors to ensure that they did not start fighting, brawling, or even starting a rebellion due to excessive energy. Of course, none of this had anything to do with Zhang Cheng. He had long since handed over the management to the captain, Eric, while he hid in the captain's cabin with Selene Baratheon, studying the ancient words and mysterious symbols on the dragon's horn. It had to be said that abducting the little lowly was probably the best decision he'd made since coming to this world. Selene Baratheon had not only memorized all the books left behind by the Targaryen family, but also knew a little of the High Valyrian language and writing. It was important to note that apart from a few poems and books that still retained a small portion of the High Valyrian language, no one could fully decipher this ancient language in writing. So even the slightest bit of direction for exploration was precious. After a full 2 weeks of research and deciphering, Zhang Cheng finally understood the meaning of most of the High Valyrian language. When translated, it was just a sentence, or rather, a eulogy. Great Granada, you are the first dragon, and also the mother of all dragons. We offer you a sacrifice in exchange for the power to bind your descendants." Zhang Cheng softly recited the sentence that he had just deciphered. He did not know if there were any mistakes, but an incomparably strange expression appeared on his face. According to the literal meaning, before the Valyrians found the dragon eggs, they seem to have discovered this dragon called Granada. And all the dragons in the world of ice and fire seem to be the descendants of this dragon. Obviously, this information was a little different from the Valyrians' discovery of a large number of dragon eggs in a volcano. To be more precise, there were no books or legends that recorded the so-called mother of all dragons. To ensure that there were no grammatical or translation errors, Zhang Cheng turned to the girl sitting on the chair and asked, "Celine, have you read about the name Granada in the Targaryen family's books?" I don't think so." The little fellow frowned and hesitated for a moment before quickly shaking his head. Ever since the creepy dead skin on half of her face had completely disappeared, her personality had gradually changed from introverted and quiet to lively and cheerful. Especially recently, she had been staying outdoors for a long time. Her originally pale skin had turned into a healthy wheat color. At this moment, she was lying on the hammock, responsible for finding out the meaning of the many mysterious symbols on the horn. However, the runes themselves were far more ancient than High Valyrian, and their progress was maddeningly slow. As everyone knew, written language had always been the symbol of humanity's transition from savagery to civilization. In this process, some civilizations preserved the primitive hieroglyphs, such as the Chinese characters of the Celestial Empire. Others slowly evolved into alphabets that were easier to learn and understand, such as the Phoenician alphabet, the ancestor of all European languages. Unfortunately, the various symbols on the surface of the dragon binder were similar to primitive hieroglyphs, but the Valyrians later developed alphabets. This meant that there was no connection between the two, and it was impossible to deduce the meaning of the oracle bone inscriptions bit by bit through ancient books and stone tablets like the Celestial Empire. Sometimes, Zhang Cheng even felt that these symbols were not invented by the Valyrians, but belonged to an even more mysterious magical civilization. The reason was simple. Everything that the Valyrians had created far exceeded the average value of the other civilizations in the Song of Ice and Fire by tens, if not hundreds of times. It was like a country that suddenly appeared on Earth in the 21st century. Strictly speaking, it was impossible for such a thing to happen, unless the Valyrian civilization was not a native civilization to begin with, and all the technology and magic they had came from another civilization. Bang! 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 Just as he was deep in thought, there was a sudden knock on the door outside the captain's cabin. "My lord, the lookout has just discovered many islands in front of us. If there's nothing else, we should have arrived at our destination. I need you to come out and confirm which island we're going to land on." Eric's slightly excited voice came through the crack in the door. "Oh, really?" Zhang Cheng immediately opened the door of the captain's cabin. "Yes." Through the binoculars, we can already see traces of golem activity on some of the islands. We'd better be careful when we land, or we'll be in trouble if we get infected with the grayscale disease, Eric explained as he made a gesture of invitation. "Don't worry, I have a way to deal with the grayscale disease. Also, get the soldiers ready for battle. Once we land, we'll clear out the golem on the island. I don't want these mindless fellows to cause trouble at such a crucial time," Zhang Cheng said as he picked up the sea map and walked out of the cabin, standing on the highest point of the deck and looking into the distance. Through the constant comparison with the sea chart, he quickly locked onto the target from the countless reefs and islands. Without turning his head back, he ordered, "Have you noticed the island with half a tower on the starboard side? Let's go straight there." "As you wish." Eric bowed slightly and began to yell for the sailors to adjust the course. In less than an hour, the battleship named Enlightenment dropped its anchor and docked in the bay near the island. Following that, the crew lowered 5 or 6 small boats and landed on the beach in an orderly manner. Before they could gain a foothold, a dozen golem covered in gray dead skin suddenly charged out, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws at the people closest to them. "Be careful. Spearmen, get ready." The well-prepared soldiers quickly got into formation, holding shields in one hand and spears over 4 meters long in the other, forming a solid line of defense. The golem at the front had undoubtedly lost all sense of reason, completely ignoring the cold gleam of the spear tip as it crashed into it, allowing the spear to pierce through its body. The rest weren't any better. There was no trace of humanity left in their eyes as they followed closely behind, pierced through by the spear like moths to a flame. Their terrifyingly infectious blood splattered everywhere, so much so that the first row of soldiers had no choice but to retreat, frantically scrubbing their blood-stained shields and weapons with seawater. They didn't want to be infected with the grayscale disease and be left to fend for themselves on some deserted island. Chapter 162. In order to have a safe logistics base, the experienced Eric had the sailors and soldiers spend several hours chopping down all the trees and weeds around the camp that could obstruct their vision. They also used the chopped wood to build 2 simple watchtowers and arrow towers so that they could monitor the surrounding area and the situation on the sea at any time. Even though most ships would avoid this cursed area due to various reasons, there were still the occasional pirates or smugglers that passed by. He didn't want the battleship docked in the bay to be sunk or captured by the enemy due to a moment of carelessness. The strenuous physical labor lasted until evening. Only then did Zhang Cheng leave the Enlightenment and walk into the camp that stood on the hillside. At this moment, a dozen tents had been set up, and most of the people were busy bathing and cooking. Due to the lack of fresh water at sea for a long time, they hadn't bathed for half a month. In addition to the hot weather, everyone was emitting a pungent stench. Now that they were ashore, they naturally had to clean up. Apart from that, the terrible bacon, the dry bread that had been bitten by rats, and the hard beans made them crave for a change of taste. In an instant, the various seabirds, beasts, fish, crabs, and shellfish on the island suffered. The hungry sailors didn't even spare the tortoises, directly killing them and throwing them into pots for dinner. Smelling the aroma of meat in the air, Zhang Cheng turned around and asked Eric behind him, "Don't you think they're a little too relaxed? We're in the center of the Valyrian ruins, and we can encounter unexpected situations at any time." "Ha ha! Don't worry, my lord. These lads are just venting. They'll calm down in a few hours at most. After all, they've been at sea for so long, and they're bored out of their minds." Eric glanced at the sailors chatting and laughing together, shrugging his shoulders nonchalantly. In his opinion, any adult man who had been at sea for more than a week would inevitably do some ridiculous things when they got ashore. For example, they would take out all the money in their pockets, find an inn, and drink to their heart's content, and then have a wild night with a woman. In fact, 9 out of 10 sailors who have been working as sailors for a long time would often drink and visit prostitutes. Therefore, hunting and improving their meals was a very normal behavior that wasn't worth making a fuss about. All right, let's make them nervous as soon as possible. You have to understand that what we're about to face isn't pirates or stone men, but something even more unbelievable. After saying that, Zhang Cheng no longer paid attention to the camp that was in a state of half-revelry. He brought little Celine straight to the middle of the island, where all kinds of green vines were crawling. According to the records of the Targaryens, this was one of the most important places in the capital of Valyria. It was also the place where the Valyrians studied supernatural powers to research to produce Valyrian steel. Years ago, they were to the Valyrian, the Valyrians, the Valyrian was to the Valyrian to be Valyrian. But no matter what, as the location of the magic ritual, there should at least be some clues left behind. His goal was to find the location of the hidden meteorite according to the clues, and then use all means possible to salvage it. The two of them, one big and one small, stopped at the entrance of the tower as they made their way through the ruins filled with weeds and shrubs. Gently caressing the intricate carvings on the wall, Zhang Cheng suddenly turned around and asked the girl, "My cute little princess, tell me, in your eyes, what is magic?" Celine was obviously shocked. She bit her lip and hesitated for a long time, then quickly shook her head. I'm not sure. I think magic is something that is both powerful and mysterious at the same time." "Powerful and mysterious? Don't you think magic is a kind of knowledge, a kind of skill, and anyone who is smart enough can learn and master it? Zhang Cheng asked with a half-smile. Learn magic. Celine was undoubtedly shocked. Her eyes widened in disbelief. Hee. What? You think it's a bit unbelievable. Actually, any kind of power you don't understand has a corresponding skill and method behind it. As long as you can master it, you will be able to master the power. Magic is no exception. Look at these black spots on the broken wall. They are the proof of the Valyrian's mastery of magic. Zhang Cheng said as he picked up a stone and handed it to the girl. The moment she took it, she subconsciously touched the cross-section of the stone. She immediately screamed and threw the stone far away. It's so hot. That's right. Did you know that these black spots are actually specially processed dragon crystals? Mixing them into the wall not only increases the hardness of the wall, but also allows the wall to resist the high temperature of dragon flames. Do you remember the walls of Dragonstone Island? They used similar craftsmanship. Unfortunately, these techniques have been completely lost. Let's go in and see if there are any valuable things left behind. After a simple sigh, Zhang Cheng stepped into the empty interior of the tower. Because the tower was broken in half, there were no obstructions above their heads. The light was very good, and they could clearly see every corner of the tower. The first thing that came into view were rows of huge bookshelves that were more than 4 meters tall, but the books on them had long decayed and turned into a pile of gray dust. Other than the bookshelves, the most eye-catching thing was the spiral staircase that circled around the pillar in the middle. Every corner of the staircase was carved with a lifelike dragon. Just as the little girl was captivated by the majestic scene in the tower, Zhang Cheng noticed that under the moss-covered ground, there seemed to be a faint energy that was faintly emitted. He quickly squatted down and pushed the moss aside, examining the patterns that covered the moss. Perhaps it was because too much time had passed, or perhaps it was because of the long-term corrosion from a humid air, but most of the patterns had become blurred. Only a flame-shaped pattern near the staircase remained intact, and it was constantly emitting heat. Celine quickly noticed this as well. She leaned over and asked carefully, "What is this?" Chapter 163. Despite the passage of time, Zhang Cheng could still clearly feel the abundant energy contained within the fire-shaped pattern. So when little Celine left, he did not immediately activate the pattern. Instead, he carefully cast a fire barrier around himself and touched the pattern lightly with the end of his flint staff. Instantly, a bright flame burst out from the center of the pattern, enveloping the entire pattern. If it weren't for the protective flame barrier taking effect in time, there was a 100% chance that he would have been severely burned, or even burned to death. Just when he was starting to think that it was a magical trap, the bright flame quickly faded away. At the same time, the moss-covered flagstones on the ground suddenly let out a loud noise and split apart, revealing a hidden tunnel. Interesting. A secret chamber? Zhang Cheng muttered in an uncertain tone as he observed the situation inside with the help of the sunlight shining down from above. On both sides of the entrance, there were colorful glass candlesticks placed at intervals. When the cold wind blew through the passage, all the candlesticks suddenly emitted a dazzling light, and the color of the surrounding air changed strangely. The white candlesticks were as bright as snow. The yellow candlesticks were as bright as pure gold. The red candlesticks were like burning flames, and the black candlesticks were like black holes that sucked in everything around them. As someone who had a deep understanding of the world of the Song of Ice and Fire, he quickly realized that these candlesticks were exactly the same as the ones placed in the City of Knowledge. Other than that, there was a sentence written in High Valyrian at the top of the porch. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng turned around and shouted at the girl hiding in the distance. "Come here. It should be safe now. Help me understand what this sentence means." Coming. Celine, who could not hold back her curiosity, ran forward in a few steps and stared at the High Valyrian language with her eyes wide open. After a full minute, she stuttered as she translated, "Only true dragons can obtain eternal life, and in flames, true dragons?" "I see." Zhang Cheng nodded thoughtfully. Without a doubt, The flames were not a trap, but a test to see if the person who opened the door was a Valyrian. It was common knowledge that the direct descendants of the Targaryen family were famous for their unique silver hair, purple eyes, and inhuman beauty. Many of them also had extremely high fire resistance, just like how Daenerys was immune to fire. In fact, this was not unique to the Targaryen family. Almost all of Valyria's upper echelons were like this. They used marriage to ensure the purity of their bloodline. Zhang Cheng was almost certain that the Valyrians had undergone genetic mutation at some point in time, or perhaps it had been artificially modified by magic. That was why they had such unbelievably perfect looks and magical constitution. After figuring this out, he did not hesitate to step into the narrow passage. With the help of the strange light released by the glass candlestick, he quickly entered a place that looked a bit like a storage room. Because it was too old, a thick layer of dust and cobwebs covered the long objects that were piled up like a mountain. The curious girl brushed aside the cobwebs and took out her handkerchief to wipe away the dust, wanting to see what the objects were. But when the dust was wiped away, she froze in place. After a full minute, she screamed, "Valyrian steel! This room is filled with Valyrian steel." What? Zhang Cheng hurriedly picked up a handkerchief to wipe away the dust, revealing the intricate patterns unique to Valyrian steel. According to the current market price, the thousands of pieces of steel in the room were enough to buy the entire world. It was clear that he had unintentionally discovered the place where the Valyrians made and stored their steel ingots. As long as he could transport these ingots back to be made into weapons and armor, he would be able to quickly arm an invulnerable elite army. Perhaps no other army in all of Westeros would be able to contend with him. After all, normal weapons would not be able to cause any significant damage to Valyrian steel armor. At the same time, normal armor would not be able to withstand the piercing of Valyrian steel swords and spears. Just as Zhang Cheng was contemplating what to do with the mountain of ingots, little Serene suddenly ran to the end of the room and pointed at a wall. "Look, there are so many words here. Can you decipher them?" Zhang Cheng asked seriously, tossing the ingots aside. Compared to the priceless Valyrian steel, he was undoubtedly more interested in the words written on the wall. "I'll try, but there are too many words. I might need some time," the girl replied excitedly. "Don't rush, take it slow. We have plenty of time." Zhang Cheng stroked the little girl's head. He knew that the biggest taboo in deciphering was to be in a hurry. If there was a mistake, the consequences would be disastrous. While little Serene was busy deciphering the words on the wall, Zhang Cheng began to carefully observe the secret underground room. He did not pay too much attention to the priceless Valyrian steel. To be more precise, he did not plan to transport all the ingots away at once. On one hand, the ship did not have the capacity to carry so much weight. On the other hand, he was not sure how everyone, including Eric, would react to the discovery of so much Valyrian steel. It was important to know that the human heart was always the most vulnerable, especially when faced with the temptation of wealth. Even loyal subordinates could be stabbed in the back without warning. Although he had enough power to suppress the rebellion, what would happen after that? Suspicion and mistrust would spread like a plague among the sailors and soldiers. It might even spread to the entire territory when they returned. As someone who considered himself to be somewhat intelligent, he did not wish to become one of the birds that died for food. Obtaining unexpected wealth was a good thing, but when the amount of unexpected wealth exceeded a certain threshold, it would not bring good luck, but bad luck. Zhang Cheng planned to secretly bring back a small portion of the ingots and let Kolo Kelba handle the rest when it grew a little older. Time passed by slowly. After about 3 hours, the sun finally began to set, and the dazzling stars once again hung in the night sky. Zhang Cheng, who had just returned from the camp, was carrying a bowl of steaming seafood chowder, 2 pieces of bread, a few fried fish, and a grilled seabird. He gently placed it beside little Serene. Chapter 164. Noticing that the little girl was no longer as focused as before, Zhang Cheng immediately asked, "How's the progress? What's written on these walls?" I've only managed to decipher a small part of it. It looks like someone's will. Celine Baratheon replied softly as she ate. Her eyes were still glued to the wall, and beside her were countless pieces of paper filled with scribbled words. Needless to say, these pieces of paper were all different translations of each word, and then combined with other words and context in a sentence to deduce the meaning of the sentence. In fact, as the alphabet itself was a form of writing that conveyed a specific meaning through pronunciation, it was very similar to Pinyin, so it was easy to create ambiguity in the process of deciphering. It was just like how the languages of the European countries on Earth were all developed from Latin. To the people of these countries, other languages of the same language family were similar to the dialects of the Celestial Empire, so it was not surprising to hear that a European could learn several, or even more than 10 languages. As the alphabet of an ancient lost civilization, High Valyrian also had the same characteristics. In addition, no one really understood this language, so little Celine could only rely on a small part of the Targaryen family's books to try and decipher the rest. Will? Zhang Cheng subconsciously turned around and glanced at the pile of human bones in the corner of the room. The girl nodded lightly. Yes. When the disaster happened, there was a fire mage called Orwin who was trapped with a dozen slaves. In order to survive, he killed the slaves one by one, and then survived by eating their corpses for a month. At the end, little Celine could not help but shiver, and her eyes revealed an unconcealable fear. For someone as kind-hearted as her, not to mention the extreme cruelty of cannibalism, just slaughtering people like animals was already beyond the bottom line of her heart. But from Zhang Cheng's point of view, a person only needed to starve for 6 to 7 days, and their subconscious survival instincts would begin to activate the bestial nature hidden under the surface of civilization. Once this bestial nature reached a certain level, they would not only treat their own kind as food, but even more disgusting things like excrement, cockroaches, and rats would also be stuffed into their mouths. Perhaps it was a little too absolute to say that no one could resist the invasion of hunger, but more than 99% was definitely correct. He didn't care about the girl's extreme reaction to eating people and continued to ask, "What about the contents of the will? Did they mention the specific details of the apocalypse? Did he leave any detailed information about Valyrian magic?" He did mention something about the apocalypse. According to his description, he first heard loud shouts and screams, and then the ground shook violently. Not long after, a deafening noise reverberated over the entire city. He tried to open the door to the secret room to see what was going on. Unfortunately, the door had already triggered some sort of protective mechanism, completely sealing off the inside. In addition, he also mentioned that the tremors first came from the southeast. As for the magic the Valyrians possess, it's all recorded on a large dragon's hard tablet, hidden in the deepest part of the tower. With that, little Celine pointed at a 3-meter-tall dragon statue not far away. Clearly, this statue was the entrance to the deeper regions. Hearing this, Zhang Cheng immediately walked closer, carefully examining every detail of the statue. After a while, he noticed that the red gemstone embedded in the dragon's eye seemed to be a little different from normal gemstones. In order to confirm his guess, he raised the staff in his hand and poked it. In an instant, a ball of scorching flames shot out from the dragon's mouth. Fortunately, he reacted quickly and rolled away in time to avoid the flames. In just a few seconds, the stone slabs on the ground began to melt, turning into a pool of terrifyingly hot lava. Damn it, the Valyrians really like fire magic. Zhang Cheng quickly pulled off his burning cape, gritting his teeth as he complained. He had only started exploring the ruins less than half a day ago, and he had already been attacked by fire twice. There would definitely be more to come. No wonder many people said that Valyrian magic was all about blood and fire, and now it seemed that it was true. As the flames from the dragon's mouth gradually decreased and disappeared, a tunnel leading deeper into the ruins appeared. Different from before, there was no light in this tunnel, and there were no fancy decorations either. The walls were just rough rocks. Withstanding the waves of heat from the lava, Zhang Cheng bent down and passed through the dragon's mouth, which was less than 5 meters long, and took out a milky white pearl. With the help of the weak light, he could see that the tunnel was like a spiral staircase, leading deeper into the ruins. The deeper he went, the higher the temperature of the surroundings. Some places even exceeded the limits of human tolerance. Interesting. Could there be an active volcano down here? Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. As a cautious person, he did not intend to go deeper into the ruins. At least, he would not act rashly before he was done with his preparations. Who knew what dangers were hidden at the end of this seemingly bottomless tunnel? Do you really think there will be a tablet with Valyrian magic down there? Serene asked curiously. She had come over at some point, and she had come over as well. Of course. Why would a person who knows he's about to die lie to others? I'm just worried that there might be something else besides the stone slabs. Zhang Qing replied with a shrug. Then when are we going in? The girl asked again, her eyes shining. Zhang Qing smiled and waved a finger in front of little Celine's face. No, it's me, not us. Just stay in the camp. It's too dangerous for you to go down there. Hey, that's not fair. I was the one who found the entrance for you. You can't go on an adventure alone. You have to bring me along. When she heard that he was not going to bring her along, the little girl immediately protested and defended her rights. To her, this could be the most exciting and only adventure of her life, so she did not want to miss it no matter what. Ha! Fun? What makes you think I'm doing this for fun? Do you remember the sailors and soldiers outside? Do you know why I'm bringing them along? Zhang Qing asked with a laugh. Serene hesitated for a few seconds before shaking her head. I don't know. Chapter 165. Without a doubt, Zhang Qing's words completely overturned the image of a friend he had painstakingly built in Selene Baratheon's heart. The relationship between the two quickly fell to a freezing point. Even after dinner, the little girl did not speak a word to him. She hid in a corner alone, sulking, and even secretly wiping away her tears. In reality, the girl did not know that coldness was Zhang Qing's true colors. What she saw before was just a facade, a disguise to make himself look harmless in daily life, just like a chameleon that constantly changed its color to blend in with the environment. However, Zhang Qing did not care about a child throwing a tantrum. To be precise, he did not have the energy to care about anything else. Because not long after he returned to the tent, the magical addiction that he had not felt for a long time suddenly flared up. His whole body was enduring unimaginable pain. In order to not let his subordinates outside notice the abnormality, he had to bite on a piece of wood and force himself not to make a sound. He curled into a tight ball to resist the indescribable torture. He fell into a semi-conscious state several times, and only slowly fell asleep when the sky gradually brightened. After some time, perhaps a few minutes, or perhaps a few hours, a series of shouts outside the tent woke him up. Dragging his exhausted body, Zhang Qing struggled to get up. He simply used the water in the wooden bucket to wash his face, lifted the curtain, and walked out. The originally calm sea suddenly began to boil like boiling water. Not only did it release large amounts of white steam, but it also had a strange dark gray color. The sailors and soldiers were frightened and gathered together to discuss what this unbelievable phenomenon meant. There were also some who knelt on the ground, sincerely praying to the seven gods, hoping for the protection of the gods. Eric, what is going on? Zhang Qing directly questioned the leader, who did not look too good. My God, my lord, you are finally awake. Just 5 minutes ago, the entire island suddenly began to shake violently, and then the sea water became like what you see now. I think it is very likely that this is the precursor to a volcanic eruption. We had better leave quickly, or else. At the end, Eric couldn't help but shiver. Even a bold person like him didn't want to encounter one of nature's most terrible disasters, a volcanic eruption. The location of the ruins was originally a large group of active volcanoes. Long ago, the Valyrians had used powerful magic to forcefully seal all the volcanoes, creating a glorious civilization. Volcanic eruption? Zhang Qing frowned subconsciously. As half a natural science enthusiast, he more or less knew some knowledge about volcanoes, but from the reaction of the surrounding seabirds and the smell in the air, there was nothing too obvious. At least, there was no smell of sulfur for the time being. Normally, no matter what kind of volcano it was, it would emit a large amount of sulfur-containing gas before an eruption. Animals and birds would also become restless, so it was easy to detect. But now, the birds and small animals were still doing what they were supposed to do. There was no sign of panic at all. The smell in the air was also very normal. It didn't look like a volcanic eruption at all. After thinking for a few seconds, Zhang Cheng immediately shook his head. No, that's not right. This isn't a volcanic eruption, but the result of some other force. Immediately form a team. I want to go down and take a look. Go down? You mean? Eric's eyes were filled with excitement and anticipation. He had long known that there was a secret passage in the ruins of the tower, but he didn't have permission to enter. Yes, let's go in and see what's hidden under the tower. Remember, pick the bravest and most experienced men. Not too many, around 30 should be enough. After saying that, Zhang Cheng turned back to the tent, stuffing everything he could possibly use into his backpack. About half an hour later, a team of 25 fully armed soldiers, 5 experienced sailors, and 37 people, including Eric and Zhang Cheng, left the camp and headed deep underground. When they passed by the room where the Valyrian steel ingots were placed, no one realized how valuable those thick, dust-covered objects were. After walking through the narrow, stuffy tunnel for about 15 minutes, almost everyone in the team was sweating profusely. They had to constantly drink water to ensure that they wouldn't die of dehydration. Glancing at the thermometer on his multifunction watch, Zhang Cheng found that the temperature had already reached 45 degrees Celsius. In such an environment, most people wouldn't be able to last long. Just as he was considering whether or not to go back the way they came, the soldier at the front suddenly stopped in his tracks and knelt on the ground with a thud. His entire body was trembling, as if he had seen something incomparably terrifying. Eric's sharp senses noticed this, and he immediately rushed up to cover the soldier's mouth and dragged him behind him. He then popped half his head out to look around the corner. In an instant, his pupils dilated and contracted, and he quickly retracted his head. His back was pressed against the wall as he bit his lower lip and gasped for breath. His face was full of fear. What's going on? What's in there? Zhang Cheng hurriedly lowered his voice and asked. Eric didn't open his mouth to answer. He only shook his head desperately, indicating that he shouldn't go over. However, he had obviously underestimated Zhang Cheng's courage and his incomparable thirst for power. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng pushed him aside and walked through the corner alone. Before he even took 2 or 3 steps, he saw a fiery red color in front of him. To be precise, it was a large pool of boiling lava. In the middle of the lava pool stood a 5-meter-tall, 3-meter-wide stone tablet. It was filled with all sorts of high-grade Valyrian characters and unknown symbols. The symbols were exactly the same as the ones on the dragon binder's horn. Needless to say, it was a record of the powerful blood and fire magic of the Valyrians. Of course, if it was just a stone tablet and the lava, it wouldn't be enough to scare someone like Eric. What really scared him was a giant red dragon lying in the lava, including its tail. It could easily be more than 250 meters long. It was a prehistoric beast the size of a small mountain. Most importantly, it wasn't dead. Instead, it was constantly snoring softly, and golden sparks would occasionally come out of its nostrils. Chapter 166. Granada, the first dragon, the mother of all dragons. Zhang Cheng subconsciously read out the translated words from the dragon's horn, his face full of horror. He couldn't believe how long the dragon had lived and how it had survived the cycle of energy dissipation. After all, even a big guy like Black Death Balerion, who had a wingspan of more than 200 meters, hadn't been able to survive when its energy continued to decline. In addition, why was the meteorite beside the dragon and not where it fell? In short, the more he thought about it, the more Zhang Cheng felt that something was amiss with the whole matter. It was as if he had missed out on a very important detail. But the current situation clearly didn't allow him to calm down and slowly analyze it. He needed to make a judgment as soon as possible. Should he snatch the meteorite and flee before the dragon woke up, or should he first record the mysterious symbols on the stone slab that resembled an entire magic system? This was because either of the two was very important to him. The former meant a new source of energy, while the latter meant more magical knowledge. Just as he was hesitating, the soldier behind him who had seen the situation inside first suddenly had a mental breakdown for some reason. He pushed away his companions and ran to the surface in a frenzy. As he ran, he let out unintelligible ravings like, "Ah, damn it." Realizing that the situation was a little out of control, Zhang Cheng didn't hesitate to cast Blink and mercilessly pierce the other party's throat. Before he could pull out his sword, the behemoth that was still sleeping flipped over, immediately causing the ground to shake violently. At that moment, everyone finally understood that the abnormal reaction on the surface of the sea wasn't a precursor to a volcanic eruption or an inexplicable supernatural phenomenon. It was caused by the dragon changing its sleeping position. As the dragon's massive body lay flat again, everything returned to normal. Apart from the panicked breathing of everyone, it was as if nothing had happened. Zhang Cheng took a deep breath and carefully pulled out his sword. He then gently laid the corpse flat, not making a single sound during the entire process. After all of this was done, he wiped the sweat off his forehead and face. He took out a pen and paper from his backpack and quickly recorded the contents of the stone slab. As for the specific meaning, he did not intend to think too much about it for the time being, at least not before leaving this dangerous island. No wonder the records of the Targaryen family claimed that a terrifying demon was sealed here, and that they had never planned to reclaim the Valyrian heritage. As time ticked by, every member of the expedition team was enduring pain and suffering. To them, not only was the temperature of the surrounding environment beyond the limits of human endurance, but more importantly, the prehistoric beasts in the magma pool were constantly stimulating their nerves. If it weren't for the fact that there was an unlucky person who showed everyone what would happen if they ran away, some of them would have already turned around and fled. However, Zhang Cheng paid no attention to the expectant gazes of the soldiers and sailors. He was fully focused on copying down the mysterious symbols and the corresponding high-grade Valyrian text. In just a few minutes, he had copied more than half of the content on the stone tablet. After all, while the stone tablet was large, there wasn't much content. There were only 150 symbols and 400 sentences of high-grade Valyrian text. When he finished copying the last word and was about to close the notebook, he raised his head and suddenly saw two eyes that looked like flowing lava staring at him. There was no doubt. The dragon had awakened. For a moment, the air seemed to have frozen. The sailors and soldiers hiding behind the staircase couldn't care less. They turned around and ran back. Only the leader, Eric, clenched his teeth and walked out with his sword. He was prepared for battle. More accurately, it was more appropriate to say that he was sending himself to his death. In the eyes of the dragon, his sword was no different from a toothpick, not to mention whether it could pierce through the thick scales that flickered with red light. Even if it did, it would at most be a superficial wound. Wanting to kill the dragon was a fool's dream. But before the soldiers and sailors could take more than a few steps, the dragon suddenly opened its mouth without warning and spat out a mouthful of suffocating flames into the tunnel. The next second, the entire tunnel was filled with flames in an instant. Not to mention the people inside. Even the stone walls that were more than 50 meters long on both sides melted into lava. Zhang Cheng felt his scalp go numb upon seeing this. He was sure that his protective flame barrier wouldn't even last half a second in the face of this level of dragon flames. Clearly, this dragon was an enemy that he could not defeat at his current stage. Just as he was about to use Blink to escape, the dragon suddenly opened its mouth full of sharp teeth and spoke in a strange voice. "Ah, how many years has it been? Finally, a human has the courage to stand before me. Now, speak your humble wish." Although Zhang Cheng didn't understand a single word of the pronunciation, he inexplicably understood the meaning behind it. Most importantly, this dragon was completely different from the other dragons in the Song of Ice and Fire world. It could actually speak. Sensing that the dragon had no intention of attacking immediately, he forced himself to calm down quickly. He then asked in the common language that was instilled into his brain by the parchment, "You are the first dragon in the legends of the Valyrians? The mother of all dragons?" "Ha ha ha!" That's right. I was the one who taught those poor little things how to tame young dragons and how to use the power of magic. I have to say, they did well, even a little beyond my expectations. But that doesn't matter. They have already received enough punishment for breaking the contract. The dragon laughed loudly, its laughter full of sarcasm. Breaking the contract? Zhang Cheng keenly grasped the key word. The dragon nodded lightly. Yes. Breaking the contract. I first signed a contract with the leaders of Valyria. I taught them knowledge, magic, and the techniques to tame my descendants. When the time was right, they had to grant me a wish. But unfortunately, after these fellows gained power, they quickly broke the contract and tried to seal me away forever. In fact, they succeeded to a certain extent, but their arrogance destroyed them in the end. Chapter 167. A trade was an exchange of value between two parties using money and services as a medium. While many people claimed that their trades were fair or even win-win, in reality, there had never been such a thing as fair or win-win since the invention of trade. On the contrary, it was always a case of a stronger party robbing the weaker party. If a trade seemed to benefit both parties, it would severely harm the interests of the third party. As many philosophers had mentioned, the nature of the world was competition, plunder, and deception. Humans had always tried to deceive themselves, believing that light and hope were always with them, even in the darkest of times. Ironically, most people who believed in the beauty of the world didn't end up well. On the contrary, those who believed in the dark nature of the world were more likely to survive in a cruel environment and more likely to obtain wealth and power. As someone who believed in the dark nature of the world, Zhang Cheng didn't think it was a wise choice to make a trade with a dragon that was far more powerful than him, especially when he didn't understand the situation. He didn't understand why the dragon would choose to sleep in this dark underground place when it had the energy crystal that could sustain its life. Why didn't it choose to rush out and fly freely in the blue sky? It was clear that either the dragon had some unspeakable plan or it was imprisoned underground by some kind of power and could not leave. Most importantly, Zhang Cheng wanted to know where the first dragon had come from and where it had provided the Valyrians with magical knowledge and power. After all, in a world like the Song of Ice and Fire that didn't produce mysterious energy, it was impossible for a magical creature like a dragon to exist without the interference of a powerful external force. Therefore, the dragon in the Song of Ice and Fire world was either a foreign species or the creation of a powerful magical civilization that had been lost to history. Why aren't you saying anything? Don't you want to make a trade with me? Don't you want to obtain the handsome looks and powerful strength of the Valyrians? Seeing that Zhang Cheng hadn't said anything for a long time, the dragon lowered its large head and tried to tempt him in a low voice. Perhaps it looked so ferocious on the outside, but its lava-like eyes revealed the light of wisdom and cunning. I'm willing to make a deal with you, Eric shouted as he took a few steps forward. You? The dragon glanced at him contemptuously, its face full of disdain. Foolish human, do you think anyone is qualified to make a deal with me? The fact that I didn't burn you to death just now is already a reward for your courage. Now get lost. With extreme anger and unwillingness, Eric took a few deep breaths before obediently retreating to the corner. He knew very well that he had no room to bargain, and it was impossible for him to retaliate against the mountain-sized dragon. If he did that, he might as well commit suicide. Zhang Cheng, who was standing not too far away, suddenly asked, "The Valyrians say you're the world's first dragon. Where did you come from? That crimson comet? Oh, are you interested in my background?" The giant dragon raised the corner of its mouth and revealed a playful smile. Of course, not only am I interested in your background, I'm also interested in the magical knowledge you've taught the Valyrians. I think it's necessary to understand your glorious past before making a deal, isn't it? Zhang Cheng pretended to be humble as he bowed. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. You're too interesting. Did you know? For thousands of years, countless people have desired to obtain power and wealth from me, but you're the first and only one to want to know my background. I have to say, you've successfully piqued my curiosity. Can you tell me, what's your motive for wanting to know my background? The dragon's deafening laughter reverberated in the empty underground. The bubbling magma suddenly seemed to be controlled by an unknown force and began to erupt rapidly and violently. At a glance, all that could be seen was a dazzling red. But what was surprising was that not a single drop of such a violent eruption landed on the two of them. Perhaps in the eyes of others, this was a coincidence, a stroke of luck. But in Zhang Cheng's eyes, it was a display of precise control over a mysterious energy. To be precise, it was fire elemental energy. There was no doubt that apart from possessing intelligence and language abilities that his descendants did not possess, Granada also possessed abnormally powerful magical abilities. As for what this ability was, it would require further observation. Zhang Cheng suppressed the questions that popped up one after another in his mind. He forced himself to remain calm and replied with a smile, "My motive is simple. That is to obtain all knowledge and power that can increase my own strength. However, I am a suspicious and conceited person. Thus, when I obtain knowledge and power, I wish to understand the nature of it, such as its potential flaws and dangers." The dragon nodded its large head lightly. "All right, I think I understand. You might not believe me, but I wasn't born in this world, and I didn't come from that crimson comet in the sky, as you said. In fact, I came from a completely foreign place. That crimson comet is where all the dragons in my world lay their eggs." "Lay their eggs? You mean—" Zhang Cheng's eyes glowed as if he had discovered something incredible. "Yes, you've guessed it too, right? That crimson comet is formed from a completely pure energy crystal. Even the radiation it emits is enough to affect an entire world. In our understanding, it is a base for breeding powerful offspring. Every time it passes by my world, the pregnant dragons will fly up to lay their own eggs. When it flies back again, they will take down the eggs and incubate them. Only the hatchlings won't be intelligent and strong enough." As Granada spoke, he seemed to have sunk into some sort of memory as he stepped on the boiling lava and walked around. "I see. That's why the dragons in this world are like wild beasts, and they don't have any magical abilities. When they were still eggs, they didn't absorb enough energy at all. That's why every single one of them is like a mentally retarded human, right?" Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes as he voiced his conjecture. He finally understood why Kulo Kelba was far more intelligent than the 3 dragons Daenerys had hatched and could understand and execute complex orders better. Chapter 168. Haha, you're very smart, young human. That's right. All the young dragons born in this world are incomplete. I don't even think of them as my own kind or descendants. Do you know this is why I agreed to let the Valyrians tame the young dragons without hesitation?" As Granada spoke, he swung his powerful tail, causing the boiling lava to splatter all over the place. He didn't hide his disdain for the young dragons, but at the same time, he was extremely confident and proud of his own strength. Zhang Cheng was keenly aware of this and nodded his head lightly. "I completely agree. The dragons hatched by the Valyrians aren't even worthy of being mentioned in the same breath as you. But I'm very curious. Since your world is so far away from here, how did you come to this world?" Granada immediately showed a vexed expression at the mention of this matter. He gritted his teeth and complained, "Damn it, it's all Lothar's fault. He gave me a barrel of top-notch blazing fire wine. In the end, I accidentally overslept after drinking it. When I woke up, I mistook this world for my own and directly flew down. When I realized something was wrong and wanted to go back, I suddenly realized that the comet passed by this world much further than my own. I couldn't fly that high. So you chose to stay and teach the Valyrians magical knowledge in an attempt to borrow their strength to return to the comet or perhaps to your own world, right?" Zhang Cheng quickly understood the ins and outs of the matter based on the information he just received. As for the rest of the story, naturally, the Valyrians developed rapidly after obtaining magical knowledge, even exceeding the dragons' expectations. In the end, when they thought they were strong enough, they brazenly tore up the contract, not only defeating their former teacher, but also forcefully imprisoning him. But as the saying goes, there is no such thing as an eternal empire in this world. When the Valyrian civilization swept across the entire world and couldn't find a worthy opponent, the Dragon King, as the ruler, began to grow arrogant, desiring to become a god that walked the world. The imprisoned dragon didn't want to be outdone and immediately set up a trap, one that could destroy the glorious civilization that it had created with its own hands but had lost control of. The arrogant Dragon King obviously didn't realize how dangerous it was to seize a power that he didn't understand, so he readily agreed to start the whole plan. As a result, Valyria was completely destroyed in a single night. Only a handful of survivors survived, and House Targaryen was one of the best. What was even more ironic was that the refugees who had been defeated by the Valyrians and had no choice but to flee to Westeros were eventually conquered by the Targaryen family, who had inherited part of the Valyrian civilization. Yes, I hope to have the Valyrians build me a giant portal when the time is right. But these ungrateful bastards used tricks to seal me underground for thousands of years. When he said the last word, Crenada's voice was filled with anger. Even the surrounding lava seemed to be affected by his strong emotions and erupted violently once again. Feeling the suffocating heat wave, Zhang Chen calmly took 2 steps back. He pointed at the red crystal meteorite on the ground that was emitting radiation and asked, "What about this? How did it end up in your hands?" Crenada cautiously covered the meteorite with his claws, a smug look on his face as he replied, "By using the Valyrians, of course. You have to understand that within a race, there will always be a small group of people who aren't satisfied with reality. They are filled with ambition and desire to leave through some extraordinary means to obtain power and status. I cast an illusion spell on a woman from a small family, making her believe that the entire Valyrian civilization was about to be destroyed. Not long after, she couldn't wait to see me. I made a deal with her, and the deal was for her to bring back this meteorite and hand it over to me. Don't tell me this woman's surname is Targaryen?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. Anyway, she doesn't have any outstanding magical talent, nor is she very intelligent. She's not worth my attention. You, on the other hand, possess a magical power that I've never seen before. Perhaps you can help me break the seal. Now answer me. Do you want to make a deal with me?" Crenada lowered his head, glaring at Lei Lin with his molten eyes. Without a doubt, answering no under such circumstances would be an extremely foolish action. Zhang Cheng was no fool, and he wouldn't joke around with his life for the sake of face or integrity. Thus, he nodded without hesitation. "Yes, I'm willing. But you have to tell me what kind of power is binding you. Also, I want to know what kind of reward I will receive if I release you." Seeing that the puny human in front of him didn't refuse, Crenada revealed a satisfied expression. He waved his tail and viciously whipped the giant dragon's heart in the middle of the room. That's it. The Valyrian Dragon King used the blood magic knowledge I provided him to create an incomparably powerful spell. He infused this spell into the stone tablet. As long as I'm more than 20 meters away from the tablet, I'll immediately fall into an extremely weak state. The further I'm away, the closer I'll be to death. Your mission is to find a way to destroy it. Remember, fire and pure physical attacks are useless. Oh, isn't it supposed to be a stone tablet that records Valyria magic? Zhang Qing's expression suddenly became a little strange. That's right. It does record a portion of magical knowledge, but its main use is to bind me. Do you understand? Don't waste your breath. Hurry up and act. Don't even think of going anywhere before you destroy it. Just as he finished speaking, Crenada sneezed without warning, and a ball of scorching flames instantly shot out from his nostrils. It was only a few feet away from Zhang Cheng, and the threat was self-evident. "Can I trouble you to move aside? I need some time to conduct a comprehensive inspection of the tablet." Zhang Cheng wasn't intimidated by the other party, and even took the initiative to step forward and push aside the dragon's wings. He stood alone in front of the large dragon's heart. He was very clear that although he seemed to be in a dangerous situation, he was actually quite safe. At least, he was safe until he lost his value. As for how he was going to escape, there was no need to rush. Especially since the red crystal meteorite was just beside him, he had to try and get his hands on it. Just like that, a human less than one, 85 meters tall, stood beside a dragon as large as a small mountain, concentrating on studying the black tablet. Chapter 169. The huge stone tablet was a slightly transparent black, and its interior was densely covered with white lines like a spider web. As long as it was hit by an external force, these lines would suddenly release a faint white light, and then absorb all the force and bounce it back to the user in another form. Simply put, it had a strong physical defense. While Leyland wasn't sure where its limits were, there was no doubt that without powerful machinery, the internal structure of the tablet couldn't be destroyed by muscle alone. Even a dragon the size of a small mountain was no exception. As for the fire resistance, it came from the blood-like substance within the tablet. More specifically, it was the solidified state of the Valyrian blood. Zhang Cheng had studied the blood of the dragon mother, Daenerys, and knew that the Valyrian blood contained a substance that was very similar to dragon blood. This substance gave them incredible fire resistance. By the same logic, if the blood was mixed with other materials, such as mud, steel, or whatever else, it would give the Valyrian a decent fire resistance. Not to mention, the blood within the tablet wasn't just blood itself. It also gave off a chilling aura of death. It probably contained the souls of the dead as well. You gave the Valyrians your blood? Zhang Cheng's face was filled with shock. You gave the Valyrians your blood? Granada nodded lightly and replied, yes. In order to give the Valyrians a certain amount of magical talent, I chose 10 people and used dragon blood to modify them. Only 4 of them survived. In the end, they joined forces and killed off all the males in their tribe. They only allowed their descendants to mate with their relatives to ensure that their magical talent didn't fade away with time. What? Does the seal have something to do with my blood? Of course it does. Heavens, I don't know how to describe it. Don't you know that by doing this, you've tied yourself to the Valyrians? They're like your descendants. Do you see the solidified red in the tablet? Thousands of Valyrians performed a cruel and bloody sacrifice, using their blood and souls to curse you. As long as their souls aren't released, you'll never be able to leave, Zhang Cheng explained as he crept closer to the meteor. Damn it, these ungrateful traitors. I gave them power. Impart knowledge to them. In the end, they actually used death to curse me. Granada roared furiously. That's right. Not only are they cursing you, but they're also protecting you from the curse. Take this gigantic stone tablet, for example. First of all, it wasn't a complete piece. It was pieced together from countless palm-sized dragon crystals. Every single one of them was enchanted with a special material that I didn't know about. It was able to withstand a huge impact from external forces. Secondly, the large amount of Valyrian blood ensured that the stone tablet would not melt under the dragon's flames. Finally, and most importantly, it is constantly absorbing the power in your body. In other words, without any replenishment, the longer you were imprisoned, the weaker you would feel. But the Valyrians obviously didn't expect you to obtain a meteorite that emitted strong radiation. In order to provoke the dragon's anger and make it lose control of its emotions, Zhang Cheng began to consciously lead the conversation. It was obvious that from their previous conversation, he had discovered the dragon's fatal weakness, its arrogance. Thousands of years ago, it was this arrogance that caused Granada to be defeated and imprisoned by the Valyrians. However, it did not learn a single lesson. Until now, it still did not understand how cunning and dangerous the human standing in front of it was. Then tell me, do you have a way to break it? The dragon did not notice the various subtle movements. It stood up and shook its huge body as it impatiently questioned. I can try, but before that, you have to tell me what magical knowledge you have imparted to the Valyrians so that I can be more prepared. Zhang Cheng raised his head and looked directly into the dragon's eyes. Granada stared back at him. After a full minute, it smirked and threatened in a sarcastic tone. Don't think that I don't know what you're thinking. But that's fine, I don't care. Remember, if you can't meet my requirements, you should know what the consequences are. Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders and smiled. Hee, I know very well. Now please start quickly. After all, I won't be able to last long in such a hot environment. If I die, it will be difficult for you to find another person to help you. In the outside world, magic has long become a legend. There are very few people who can control magic. I can guarantee that none of them can be compared to me. Oomph. Granada spat out a ball of golden flames from its nostrils to express its disdain. It did not continue to pester Leyland. About 2 to 3 minutes later, it began to talk about fire and blood magic. Especially the latter, it was enough to make one's scalp go numb. As the name suggested, blood magic was a spell that used blood ties, sacrifices, and torture to obtain supernatural powers. The caster not only had to be powerful, but also had to ensure that their hearts were not distorted by the darkness. Otherwise, the backlash from blood magic was no joke. But at the same time, the power of blood magic was also very strong. The most typical example was the shadow killer summoned by the Red Witch Melisandre. Apart from that, the Dragon Kings of Illyria could also sacrifice a dragon to obtain the full power of a dragon for a short period of time. This included incredible muscles, life force, fire breath, and even the appearance of a dragon. As for fire magic, it was nothing more than transforming mysterious energy into flames. In this aspect, Dalaran's research was far more in-depth than that of the dragons. Zhang Cheng's only gain was that he understood how to use the energy of the Song of Ice and Fire world more effectively and quickly to shape the form of his spells. This meant that he had finally broken the shackles that limited his power. He could freely use any known spell. Of course, as a newbie, he still needed some time to practice if he wanted to use it in a real battle. Perhaps because he was too focused, Granada did not notice the puny human in front of him. In less than 10 minutes, Leyland had released all the arcane spells stored in his body. He then frantically drew energy from the red meteorite to replenish himself. Chapter 170. Energy. Limitless energy. Perhaps it was because the energy stored in his body had been in a half-dried state ever since he came to this world. But the moment the restrictions were lifted, Zhang Cheng immediately felt as if he was a giant sponge, crazily absorbing energy that was many times more than what he had before. Even though this energy was not as pure as the arcane energy provided by the well water, it was much more active. Its influence on the various elements was much stronger than any known energy. This also meant that using this energy to release fire, ice, and other spells would be more than twice as powerful. However, spells such as Transfiguration, Blink, and arcane missiles would be greatly reduced in power, and there might even be serious mistakes. Feeling the abundant energy flowing through his veins, he took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He did not want to act rashly. After all, breaking the shackles did not mean that he could defeat this giant dragon that was the size of a small mountain. Besides, even if he could barely defeat it, Zhang Cheng did not intend to do so. Rather than risk his life to fight a powerful enemy head-on, he preferred to use his brain and intelligence to achieve his goals. After the Valyrians defeated the Loinars, they obtained knowledge of a type of magic that allowed them to control water. However, due to their constitution, they were unable to control any magic other than fire and blood. But the Dragon King was unwilling to give up. He gathered the most outstanding scholars and mages of the time to research it together. In the end, even though they were unable to control water like the Loinars, they inadvertently discovered the essence of energy. From then on, the Valyrians began to avoid my surveillance and carried out their own secret research. By the time I discovered it, their progress had far exceeded my expectations. Granada recounted the history of the past as he recounted the development of the Valyrian magical civilization. As a dragon that had personally witnessed how the Valyrians developed, rose to power, and finally swept across the entire world, what he knew was far more credible than the legends and books. At the same time, it also revealed many mysteries. For example, before the apocalypse, why did the female prophet of the Targaryen family suddenly know of the impending disaster, and why did she so resolutely persuade the entire family to migrate to the outpost to the western continent, Dragonstone Island? It wasn't that she had any prophetic ability, but that she was confused by the illusion created by the dragon. In the end, the two sides reached a deal, and the red meteorite was the core of the deal. It was no wonder House Targaryen never intended to return to their homeland. It wasn't that they didn't want to come back and receive the legacy of Valyria, but they knew that there was a powerful dragon beneath the island, one that held a grudge against the betrayal of the Valyrians. Zhang Cheng gently touched the stone tablet that was not too hot, even though it was soaked in lava. According to what you said, the magic that reflected external forces should have originated from the water mages of the Loina people. Under normal circumstances, even if the stone tablet had not completely melted, it should still be at least several hundred degrees Celsius. But now, it was at most around 60 degrees Celsius. Granada lightly nodded his large head. Yes, at the very least, I didn't teach the Valyrians anything like that. So, have you thought of a way to destroy it? Zhang Cheng rubbed his chin and pretended to ponder for a few minutes. Suddenly, he asked, have you heard of the principle of thermal expansion and contraction? Thermal expansion and contraction? What does that mean? The dragon clearly failed in physics, his face full of confusion. It's very simple. According to a hypothesis, everything in the world is made up of countless tiny particles that cannot be seen with the naked eye. When the temperature rises, the vibrations of the particles will increase, causing the size of the object to increase. When the temperature drops, the vibrations of the particles will also decrease, causing the object to decrease in size. Zhang Cheng calmly explained the principle of thermal expansion and contraction. The world is made up of particles that cannot be seen with the naked eye. Is this a madman or idiot's hypothesis? Don't tell me you believe it. Granada mercilessly mocked and ridiculed. Perhaps. But when the temperature rises, the object's size will increase. When the temperature drops, the object's size will decrease as well. Zhang Cheng did not attempt to argue. He did not want to waste time giving a scientific lesson to a dragon that was destined to be his enemy. Does it have anything to do with destroying the stone tablet? Granada asked, raising his front claws to poke at the lava beside him. Of course. Think about it. If I first completely freeze this stone tablet, and then you use your scorching dragon flames to heat up, what will the result be? After saying that, Zhang Cheng casually pulled out a knife that was used to cut meat, and his right hand released an ice-cold aura. In the blink of an eye, the dagger was frozen from the inside out. Following that, he stuck the front part of the dagger into the lava, then pulled it out and froze it again. After repeating this a few times, the steel material finally could not withstand the repeated ravaging and shattered into a few pieces. Holding the remaining half of the dagger, Zhang Cheng explained with a smile, do you see this? Rapid heating and sudden cooling is fatal to any solid matter. Even steel that is a good conductor of heat is like this, not to mention the dragon crystal that is not a good conductor. Do you know where the endless yellow sand in the desert comes from? It's not that there was sand in the beginning, but that the desert lacks plants that can block the sun. Large amounts of rocks are exposed to the sun every day, causing the surface temperature to rise rapidly and the volume to swell. Furthermore, the heat is slowly transmitted to the interior. Once night falls, the temperature of the environment will drop rapidly. The exterior of the rock will start to shrink, but the interior will maintain the high temperature and expand outwards. Under this contraction and expansion, the internal structure of the rock will be destroyed very quickly. Perhaps nothing will be seen in a day or two, but after a few months, years, or even decades, the rock will slowly shatter and become smaller and smaller. The result will be the sand that we see. Granada's eyes lit up when he saw this scene. He urged impatiently, then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and freeze this damned stone tablet. I want to shatter it immediately. Don't be anxious. I still have a small technical problem that I have not solved. You have to know that quickly freezing such a huge stone tablet is far beyond the scope of my ability. I need an endless source of energy, or else I will exhaust all my energy before I can cover the entire surface. At this moment, Zhang Cheng finally revealed his foxtail. Without a doubt, he only had one target, and that was the red meteorite that was emitting intense radiation. Once the meteorite was in his hands, he would immediately escape. As for the matter of releasing the giant dragon, it had never entered his consideration. Chapter 171. You want it. Granada fiddled with the red crystal meteorite. his eyes full of vigilance and scrutiny. Obviously, to him, this meteorite not only represented power, but also the ability to survive for a long time. As a magical creature of such a large size, it needed to absorb a large amount of energy every day to maintain its basic needs. Perhaps it would not be seen in the first few decades of the comet's passage, but once the energy in the air began to thin, some of its special organs would begin to deteriorate and age rapidly, eventually leading to death. To some extent, the radiation emitted by the meteorite was equivalent to a life support system, so even a fool would not easily give it to others. Zhangqing knew very well that he had touched Granada's bottom line, so he pretended to be indifferent and spread out his hands. Please don't misunderstand. I don't want to obtain it. I just want to borrow it. Do you think I'm a threat to you in this place full of lava? Besides, the one who wants to break the seal and regain freedom is you, not me, so the choice is also in your hands. Granada narrowed his eyes, as if considering the danger of this matter. After a full minute, his desire for freedom finally won over everything. He carefully held the crystal-like meteorite in his claws and placed it in front of Zhangqing. He lowered his voice and threatened, "Human, don't try to play any tricks, or I guarantee that you will taste a taste worse than death. Thank you for your trust. Don't worry, I haven't lived enough, and I won't take the initiative to court death." Zhangqing bent down and bowed, picking up the meteorite that was the size of an adult's head. As soon as he touched it, he immediately realized how such a small thing could release a power that could destroy everything in an instant. The reason was simple. The energy contained in this small piece of crystal was equivalent to 10,000 times the total amount of energy scattered by the red comet every time it passed through the Song of Ice and Fire world. What's more, it was so highly compressed that just holding it in one's hand could provide countless benefits to the owner. For example, he could slowly transform himself to have a better magical constitution, or continuously replenish his energy consumption, and so on. In short, just as the Valyrian Dragon King had predicted, whoever could fuse with this meteorite would become a god walking in the world. At least in the world of the Song of Ice and Fire, nothing could compete with him. As for the otherworldly demons, who were regarded as the number one enemy in the storyline, even the Forerunners and the Children of the Forest could defeat them. If it had been the Valyrian civilization at its peak, it would have been just as easy. They had no right to stand in front of a god. "Human, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and start." Seeing that Zhangqing had not moved for a long time, Granada hurried him. For some reason, after the meteorite left its control, it had an inexplicable sense of uneasiness in its heart, as if something bad was about to happen. "No problem. Please take 2 steps back. I need a few minutes to prepare." After saying that, Zhangqing quietly took out a runestone from his pocket and activated it. Then he raised his other hand and pressed it on the huge dragon crystal steel. He began to release white frost. In the blink of an eye, a hard layer of ice spread rapidly in all directions with the contact as the center. In about 5 or 6 minutes, he had completely frozen the entire steel. As time passed, the layer of ice became thicker and thicker, and the cold air emitted from it caused a small part of the boiling magma below to solidify and harden. After 10 minutes, the surface of the steel began to shrink slowly due to the cold, but the inside still maintained a relatively high temperature as it expanded outwards. Suddenly, an ear-piercing cracking sound came from the upper right corner. A very obvious crack appeared on the ground. However, the white lines like a spider's web began to glow, repairing the crack bit by bit. "Awesome. That was great. Continue. Don't stop." Seeing that there was hope of breaking the seal, the dragon stood up and roared excitedly. It had tried countless methods, but in the end, without exception, it had all failed. To be precise, it could not even leave a small mark on the surface of the steel. But now, after a long period of freezing, serious cracks had appeared on the surface of the steel. It believed that as long as it continued, it would only be a matter of time before it was destroyed. For the first time in 1,000 years, it felt that it was so close to returning to the sky and flying freely again. Sensing that the other party's attention was completely attracted by the cracks on the surface of the steel, Zhang Cheng slightly raised the corner of his mouth and quickly retreated, shouting loudly, "Now, use your dragon flames to burn it." Roar. Accompanied by a deafening roar, Granada opened its mouth full of sharp teeth and spat out scorching dragon flames in front of it. As an ancient dragon that had lived for countless years, the flames it spat out were no longer red, but a dazzling white gold. Even the air was distorted by the terrifying high temperature, causing one to be unable to see what was in front of them clearly. Zhang Cheng, who had been waiting for this moment, did not hesitate to crush the glowing rune in his hand. Then he bowed slightly to the dragon that was still focused on spitting out flames. "My apologies, respected mother of dragons. I have suddenly changed my mind and do not intend to cooperate with you. Anyway, I have already told you how to break the seal, haven't I?" Just as he finished speaking, his body slowly became transparent, as if he could disappear at any time. "No, you actually dared to deceive me." Sensing that something was wrong, Granada immediately stopped spitting out flames. It turned its head and roared angrily, flapping its strong wings as it swung down. Eric, who had been hiding in the corner, had unknowingly appeared behind Zhang Cheng. He raised his sword and stabbed down fiercely. At the same time, he said with a sinister smile, "My apologies, my lord. I did not intend to betray you on purpose. I only hoped to obtain a chance to change my fate." At this critical moment, Zhang Cheng calmly raised his right hand and released the icicle spell that he had been secretly preparing for a long time. Eric, who was caught off guard, was instantly shredded into a bloody mess by the countless ice shards. There were even a few places where his internal organs and eerie white bones were exposed. Ah! The intense pain caused him to scream uncontrollably, desperately trying to stuff back the intestines that had fallen out. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. With injuries of this degree, unless there was a complete modern medical system or powerful magic potions, he would die from excessive blood loss in a few minutes at most. There's no need to apologize. I understand your thoughts. Moreover, I have never truly given you the slightest bit of trust from the start. How can this be considered a betrayal? After saying this sentence full of sarcasm, Zhang Cheng's blurry figure dissipated into the air with a bang. Chapter 172. No, 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 no. Liars. You damned humans are all despicable and shameless liars. I will kill all of you. Kill all of you. Seeing the precious meteorite being snatched away, Granada immediately fell into a state of incomparable madness. It waved its wings, tail, and claws, smashing everything it could touch into smithereens. Apart from the dragon crystal slab in the center, which was still standing, the rest of the ground, whether it was the hard rocks or the boiling lava, were all destroyed. What was even more terrifying was that as it began to lose control of its emotions, the dormant volcano beneath the island suddenly erupted without warning. After a series of loud, rumbling sounds, scorching magma gushed out from the ground, together with a large amount of volcanic ash. In just a few minutes, the sky above the sea was covered by a terrible haze. Countless dust fell from the sky quickly, and in just a few minutes, it had piled up more than half a meter deep. In a few hours, the island would be completely covered by volcanic ash. The soldiers and sailors who had been guarding the camp realized this and immediately rowed their small boats back to the ship without a word. They then pulled out the anchor and set sail to avoid this devilish sea. Kulo Kelba, soaring above the blue sky, seemed to have received some sort of order. It grabbed a large wooden chest placed behind the ruins of the tower and flew directly in the direction of King's Landing City, completely ignoring the panicking crew. Not long after the ship and dragon left, a few other islands in the vicinity of the sea began to emit loud noises. Soon after, blinding red flames lit up the sky. The violent crustal movements even caused a terrifying tsunami. Giant waves over 50 meters tall rushed towards the northern peninsula. It was estimated that the villages and towns near the coast would be reduced to nothing under the impact of the tsunami. Tens of thousands of people would die, and even more would die in the following epidemic and starvation. However, as one of the main culprits behind all this, Zhang Cheng had already left the scene of the incident. To be more precise, he had teleported back to the basement of his residence in King's Landing City. Obviously, to prevent himself from being able to escape unscathed when he encountered danger, he had already placed a teleportation rune here. Once he realized that something was wrong, he would activate the other half of the rune. After 60 seconds of preparation time, he would be able to teleport to the other half of the rune safely. Of course, due to the huge consumption of ultra-long distance teleportation, all the teleportation runes sold by Dalaran were single-use. In fact, because the price was too expensive, Zhang Cheng had only sold 4 sets in case of emergency. He didn't expect that they would come in handy so soon. Of course, compared to the red crystal meteorite in his hand that was emitting intense energy radiation, consuming a set of precious teleportation runes was not worth mentioning at all. As long as he could get the meteorite, he was even willing to exchange his dragon for it. As for the life and death of the people around the peninsula, he didn't care at all. Only endless knowledge and power were worth pursuing. Then should I first sort out the magical knowledge I just obtained, or should I study the mystery of this meteorite? Zhang Cheng muttered to himself as he took off his cloak and wrapped it around the meteorite. He then pushed open the door and walked out of the dark basement. He hadn't walked far when he bumped into the maid, Dana, who was about to go get some flour. The 17-year-old girl was taken aback. She hurriedly bowed and asked incoherently, My lord, why are you in the basement? No, wait, when did you come back? Relax, don't be nervous. I just came back. Tell me, what happened in King's Landing while I was away? Zhang Cheng was obviously in a good mood. He had a friendly smile on his face. Well, the biggest thing is the wedding of King Joffrey and Lady Marjorie. Ever since the wedding was decided, House Tyrell of High Court has been sending food, vegetables, and meat into the city. Now, the price of food has returned to normal. Oh, and Lord Tyrion came by yesterday afternoon. He asked him to pass you a letter. As she spoke, Dana hurriedly searched her body for a long time before she finally pulled out a sealed letter. Zhang Cheng took it and scanned it. He immediately smiled and sighed. It seems that my friend here isn't very satisfied with her marriage and family. Not very satisfied? Lady Sansa is so beautiful, and she comes from a good family. Lord Tyrion has no reason to be dissatisfied, the maid muttered in confusion. Hee, you're still too young and don't understand the profoundness within. Well, go about your business. I'm going to visit the newlyweds. You don't have to prepare me lunch or dinner. Zhang Cheng didn't want to waste his breath on a maid who didn't know anything. After hiding the meteorite, he left the manor and headed for Tyrion's quarters. He didn't realize that as soon as he stepped out of the front door, a few children who had been loitering nearby darted into the alleyway. In less than half an hour, Varys, the chief of intelligence in the deepest part of the Red Keep, received the news. He stared at the small words on the note for a full 5 minutes before he murmured expressionlessly, "You're finally back?" It's time for them to make their move. At the same time, in the largest brothel on Silk Street, Peter Baelish received the news as well. He sneered and muttered to himself, "I don't care who you are. I don't care what kind of magic you have. You're dead for sure this time." Zhang Cheng would never have guessed that he would be targeted by 2 of the best schemers in all of Westeros so soon after his return to King's Landing. He was considering whether he should speed up the plot so that he could return as soon as possible. After getting the meteorite, this world was no longer of much value to him. Instead of wasting his time here, he might as well finish his mission and leave as soon as possible. Far away in the ruins of Illyria, the dragon had regained its senses. It sprinkled a drop of boiling dragon blood on the dying Eric as it chanted an incantation. In the blink of an eye, Eric, who was barely breathing, jumped to his feet. His body trembled uncontrollably. Then his damaged muscles, blood vessels, internal organs, and skin began to regenerate at an incredible speed. In the end, when everything was repaired, he turned from a mature, robust, and hairy middle-aged man into a tall, handsome young man with long silver gold hair, fair skin, and a pair of mesmerizing light purple eyes. Any woman who saw them couldn't help but go crazy for them. Go, Servant, get the meteorite back for me. Bring that damn thief back as well. Granada roared at Eric, who had just been reborn. Chapter 173. Welcome. Welcome back to King's Landing, my dear friend. The moment they met, the imp opened his arms wide and gave Zhang Cheng a warm hug. Perhaps it was because he had gone through a bitter war, but he seemed to have matured a lot, especially the very obvious scar on his face, which added a bit of unique charm out of nowhere. Thank you. It's so good to see you safe and sound. Do you know, the last time I left, you were still unconscious on the bed, and your face was as pale as a corpse. But look at you now. Not only have you recovered, you've even married a beautiful young wife. Congratulations, Tyrion. By the way, I'm sorry I missed your wedding. Zhang Cheng bent down and patted the imp on the back with a smile. As a person who understood the plot quite well, he clearly knew that this marriage in name would not last long. Besides, Sansa Stark was a typical shallow and vain girl. She was only interested in young, handsome men of noble birth. As for the soul beneath the surface, she did not yet have the experience to appreciate it. In Zhang Cheng's eyes, the imp was far better than Loras Tyrell or Joffrey, both in terms of personality and ability. Unfortunately, Sansa did not realize the merits of her legal husband. She only noticed his dwarf-like height and slightly ugly appearance. Not long ago, she even dreamed of marrying Loras. She did not understand that she had become a powerful tool in the fight for the right to rule the North. What men wanted from her was not love, but her young, beautiful body and a womb that could give birth to healthy offspring. Ha! Stop joking, man. I believe you should be very clear that this marriage is not what I want at all. Besides, I haven't even kissed the bride's lips yet. How can we be husband and wife? Tyrion laughed self-deprecatingly. There was a hint of bitterness and helplessness in his laughter. To this day, he still held a grudge against his father, Tywin, for ignoring his great achievements and taking away the power of the prime minister from him. After all, as the saying goes, power is a deadly poison. Most people would do everything they can to protect it and would not hesitate to pay any price for it. The little devil himself was a dwarf, a disabled person who had been criticized and discriminated against. Only when he held great power in his hands could he feel respect and fear from others. He did not want to lose his power, and he did not want to lose the respect he had earned with great difficulty. Most importantly, it was only when he became the prime minister that he truly felt like a person named Tyrion Lannister. What people respected was his outstanding personal ability, not the famous family behind his name. Zhang Cheng had been an ordinary man. He knew what it felt like to be different. Now, if he had two choices, he could return to his original world and be an ordinary man, or continue this dangerous game that could cost him his life. He would choose the latter without hesitation. The reason was simple. He had tasted power. He would rather face all kinds of challenges than return to being an ordinary man. Perhaps it was this restlessness hidden in his subconscious that was chosen by the owner of the parchment and began the series of incredible adventures that followed. Zhang Cheng suddenly felt sorry for the imp. He had always tried his best to show his best qualities, hoping to gain the recognition of others, especially his father Tywin Lannister. Unfortunately, Tywin had never seen Tyrion as his son. In his eyes, Jaime was the only heir of the Lannister family. Tyrion was just a disgrace to the family, a deformity that should not have been born into this world. Of course, Zhang Cheng was not stupid enough to tell the truth. He smiled and shrugged. Looks like you have a lot of resentment. Come on, let's go inside and talk slowly. I also want to see your beautiful wife while I'm at it. Then what are we waiting for? I got a few bottles of good Dornish red wine the day before yesterday. You like it? The imp raised his arm and made an inviting gesture, then led the way. A few minutes later, the two arrived at what looked like a sitting room. Sansa saw someone come in and hurriedly got up to bow, but when she saw who it was, she froze. There was even a trace of fear in her eyes. Long time no see, Lady Stark. Oh, I'm sorry. I should call you my lady. What, is there something on my face? Why are you staring at me like that? Zhang Cheng sensed her emotions and asked with a smile. He thought Sansa's reaction was probably influenced by Littlefinger. Perhaps the ambitious man had said something behind his back to prevent him from getting too close to the girl. No, nothing. I'm just a little surprised. When did you return to King's Landing? Sansa immediately tried to change the subject. Not long. The reason I came back was to visit you newlyweds and give you my blessings. Zhang Chung didn't pursue the matter and pretended to be friendly as he replied. Thank you very much. Now that you're here, I must tell the kitchen to prepare a feast for lunch. Excuse me. Sansa lifted her skirts and curtsied before disappearing around the corner. After watching her disappear, Zhang Chung turned to the imp who was pouring wine. My friend, your wife seems to be afraid of me. Tyrion raised his cup and drained it in one gulp. His lips curled in disdain. Who knows? In any case, ever since she married me, she has never shown a smile. She is like a frightened little bird all day long. I can't possibly blame a poor girl whose father and brother were tragically killed. Can I? Chapter 174. Since when did you care about my marriage? To tell you the truth, I'm not sure why I didn't refuse the marriage. Perhaps it's just as you said. I sympathize with Sansa's plight and want to protect her. At least after she marries me, Joffrey won't be able to humiliate and hurt her so blatantly. As for fulfilling my duties as a wife, forget it. I'd rather spend some money to find another woman than force a girl to do something she doesn't want to do. Besides, given the current situation, who do you think would dare to risk offending the Lannister family and take Sansa away from me? Perhaps there are a lot of restless fellows spying on us from the shadows, eager to take advantage of House Stark's centuries of rule in the north, but I don't think anyone would dare do anything about it. Tyrion poured himself another goblet of wine and drank it down in one gulp. Like many people who had suffered a severe psychological setback, when he realized he had lost his precious power, he began to drink to vent and indulge. He spent most of his days half drunk and half awake. No, you're wrong, my friend. Zhang Chung smiled and shook his head. It's undeniable that after the Baratheon brothers and Robb Stark were eradicated, no one in the Seven Kingdoms, save for Dorne in the south, has enough power to challenge House Lannister. But don't forget, this world has no shortage of schemers and ambitious people. Think about it. If someone told Sansa he could send her home, would she still stay by your side and face the enemy who killed her father and brother? The imp had never been a political idiot. On the contrary, he was smart and had read countless books. He immediately understood the strong hints in Tyrion's words. After a few seconds of hesitation, he quickly asked, Can you tell me who the schemers and ambitious people you're talking about are? The Boltons? Bolton? No. Roose Bolton may be a master at taking advantage of the situation. He knows how to preserve his strength and stand on the side of the victor at a critical moment, but he's certainly not a schemer. A true schemer is always good at hiding himself. If you look into who Sansa is close to, I'm sure you'll find out soon enough. But I have to remind you that you'd better hurry up, or else. Before Zhang Chung could finish his words, a young and beautiful maid came in with a tray. She didn't even say a word, nor did she bow. She simply placed the food on the table and made a very subtle eye contact with the little devil. Then, she turned around and disappeared at the end of the corridor. Zhang Chung saw everything. After the maid walked away, he teased meaningfully, I was wondering why you didn't care about your new wife at all. It turns out that you already have someone else in your heart. Please be careful, my friend. I'm not sure how your father, Lord Tywin, will react to this news. I don't understand what you're talking about. She's a lowly servant girl, please. Tyrion tried to sound unconcerned. Stop acting in front of me. You should know very well that you can't fool me at all. I'm afraid you haven't realized it yet. But when that maid appeared just now, the way you looked at her almost melted. As the saying goes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. No matter how good a liar is at deceiving, the eyes can never deceive. Besides, you've never been good at deceiving. I'm not your enemy. Zhang Cheng's lips curled up as he exposed Tyrion's poor acting. Damn it, I'm beginning to hate dealing with you. Tyrion gritted his teeth. Tyrion grumbled through gritted teeth. Then he asked nervously, Is it as obvious as you say it is? Yes, very obvious. I think it's best if you don't meet her when there are outsiders around. It's only a matter of time before she finds out. All right, let's stop talking about your rich and colorful love life. It's time to take out what you promised me, Zhang Cheng said as he stretched out his right hand. Without further ado, Tyrion opened a hidden compartment on the shelf on the right side of the wall and took out a yellowed scroll covered in black spots. He carefully unfurled it. Be careful. This thing is very old. It will break if you use too much force. Relax. I'll give it back to you after I take a look. Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes as he quickly scanned through the fading handwriting on the scroll. The scroll contained the ingredients and spells for crafting wildfire that the Alchemist Guild had kept for many years. As a collector of knowledge, he would not give up on anything that might be useful or enlightening to him. The imp stood by the side, silently observing Zhang Cheng's concentrated expression. A bitter smile appeared on his face. Before the Battle of Blackwater River, he had made many promises to gain as much power as he could. But stealing the secret recipe for wildfire was undoubtedly the most special one. Even now, he still did not understand what the man in front of him desired. Wealth? Even though Zhang Cheng had made a fortune during the siege, he had spent most of it. Power? After taking over Brightwater City, Zhang Cheng had delegated the power of governance to a small bureaucratic system he had set up himself. He had been hiding in his room all day, doing something unknown. Beauty? According to the imp's intelligence, Zhang Cheng had not slept with any woman or man. His level of abstinence was comparable to that of the most devout monks. The only thing Tyrion was certain of was that Zhang Cheng seemed to have a strong desire for supernatural power. Just as the living room fell into silence, Sansa, who was hiding in the kitchen, quietly took out a small bottle of liquid surrounded by faint purple smoke from her belt. She uncorked the bottle and poured it into a bowl of soup. When the cook was not looking, she quickly stirred the soup with a spoon until all the purple smoke disappeared. It was the first time she had done something like this. Her heart raced. In a few seconds, her back was drenched in sweat. Nervous, uneasy, panic. Sansa did not know what she was feeling at that moment. But to return home, to return to the Winterfell, where she was born and raised, she was willing to pay any price, even if it meant staining her hands with blood. To ensure that the soup in the bowl was delivered to the right person, she even instructed the maid in charge of delivering the dishes. Chapter 175. So, what did you learn from that ancient scroll? Tyrion asked without looking up as he drank the hot soup that had just been served. As a well-read person, he was very clear about the long history of the King's Descent Alchemist Guild. At the same time, he was also very clear that many people had spied on the method of making wildfire, but for some reason, no one had ever succeeded. Even though many people had read the contents of the scroll, they still couldn't figure out how the mysterious incantations worked. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly and replied, "It's nothing. It's just a little trick to mystify things. The key to creating wildfire lies in the last sentence." The last sentence? Tyrion quickly put down his spoon and opened the scroll to read it word by word. The last line read, "The hottest flame needs to be watered with blood." He subconsciously frowned and muttered in an uncertain tone, "Using blood to water the fire? Are you sure that won't extinguish the flame?" Ha ha ha. Think about it. When was the Alchemist Guild founded? When did they start making wildfire? In fact, the method of making wildfire originated from House Targaryen, and House Targaryen came from the glorious Valyrian Empire. In other words, the method of making wildfire was invented by the Valyrians. Haven't you heard that the magic the Valyrians wield is blood and fire? Zhang Cheng explained with a laugh. Perhaps before he met the dragon sealed under the island, he had thought that wildfire was a very mysterious magic substance. But now he understood that the so-called wildfire was not much different from his own method of making dragon fire. The only difference was that dragon fire was a pure elemental energy, condensed from the mysterious substance in the dragon's blood. Wildfire, on the other hand, was made from the corpses of people who had died tragically through the cruelest of blood magic sacrifices to obtain terrifying power. Because the corpses had been tortured and tortured countless times before they died, they contained a large amount of pain, resentment, and other negative emotions. They were very, very unstable, and the slightest mistake could lead to disastrous consequences. This was also why wildfire rarely appeared in the public eye when the Targaryen family had dragons. But after the extinction of the dragons, wildfire quickly became the Targaryen dynasty's secret weapon, frequently mentioned as a deterrent. I see. The imp nodded thoughtfully, then pointed at the steaming soup bowl on the table. Try the cooking of my new chef. His seafood soup is one of the few things that can make me happy other than wine. Zhang Cheng lowered his head and glanced at the bowl of dark cuisine in front of him. He didn't know what was in it, but the corners of his mouth twitched slightly. To be honest, he didn't really dare to compliment the so-called delicacies of Westeros. Even the most ordinary meat soup or roasted pig would have some strange condiments added to it, such as antler powder, honey, and so on. It was guaranteed that one wouldn't want to eat a second bite after the first bite. Most of the time, when he attended banquets, he mainly ate fresh fruit. He would never touch cooked food. Tyrion obviously did not know what Zhang Cheng was thinking. Drink it while it's hot, he urged. Drink it while it's hot. I promise you'll love it. All right, I'll try it. Zhang Cheng picked up the spoon and took a small sip. After some hesitation, he decided to take a sip first. It was not like he would die from drinking it. There was no strange taste, no messy condiments. There was only the taste of unknown clams and shrimps, and the black part was soft seaweed. After a while, Zhang Cheng finished the soup in the bowl. He stood up and said to the imp, "It tastes good. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave. While it's still early, I have to see Joffrey. He hasn't stopped writing me letters." Joffrey? Tyrion paused, then complained in disgust. Damn it. You shouldn't have taught him those dangerous powers. Did you know? Not long after you left, he used the magical ring you gave him to burn 6 pitiful servants alive. Now everyone in the Red Keep is in danger, afraid they'll be the next victim. Oh, he's already able to control the ring and release scorching flames? Zhang Cheng's eyes were filled with surprise. The ring he made for Joffrey was an extremely unstable experimental product. If the user did not have enough talent and control, all sorts of accidents would happen very quickly. It could even lead to the user's death. Joffrey, on the other hand, was fine. Not only was there no accident, he was also able to control it well. This meant that he had excellent talent and constitution. Of all the people Zhang Cheng had met so far, he had only seen such talent in House Targaryen's last direct descendant, Daenerys. Don't mention it. At first, he could only release flames the size of a fingernail through the ring. But later, for some reason, the flames he released grew bigger and hotter. Now, he can roast a horse into a charred corpse in half a minute. Even my father is having a headache over this. He wants to discuss it with you. Also, news of you having a dragon reached King's Landing 2 days ago. You'd better be prepared. Tyrion had no intention of hiding anything. He told him everything he knew. Perhaps he resented Tywin's unfair treatment, or perhaps he wanted to use Zhang Cheng's power to reclaim his power, but he did not choose to side with the Lannisters this time. Understood. Thank you, my dear friend. I owe you this once. If you encounter any trouble in the future, you can come to me at any time, and I will help you deal with it. After saying this, Zhang Cheng slightly bowed and quickly left the little demon's residence. He did not notice that right after he left, Sansa had tied a bright red cloth to a pillar on the balcony on the second floor. When the 2 cloaked figures hiding in the shadows saw him, they immediately followed him from distance. They did not get too close, but they did not stray too far away either. After following Zhang Cheng for about 10 minutes, Zhang Cheng entered a sparsely populated alley. The 2 of them immediately split up and completely blocked the narrow alley, one in front and one behind. Chapter 176. Oomph. You really are as arrogant as the rumors say. One of them, who was wearing a dark red cloak, sneered and took off the hood on his head, revealing his stunning face. There was no doubt that she was a woman, and a very beautiful one at that, especially her 2 deep eyes that seemed to have seen through the vicissitudes of life, as if they had seen through everything in the world, exuding an unbelievable charm from within. However, Zhang Cheng didn't just notice her beauty and temperament. He also noticed the ruby hanging from the end of the necklace around her neck. Only a blind person wouldn't be able to sense the powerful magical energy contained within. Even a slightly sensitive, ordinary person could sense how unusual this gem was. After a moment's hesitation, he immediately smirked and teased in a playful tone. "The priestess of our healer? You wouldn't happen to be Melisandre, would you?" "Melisandre? No, don't compare me to her. I am the first follower of the Light King, and also his most loyal servant. My faith in him is as firm as steel," the woman said as she slowly walked forward. She didn't have any defensive equipment or weapons on her, and she didn't seem to be afraid of a possible melee. "The first follower? You're Kinvara." Zhang Cheng's pupils suddenly contracted. Out of all the characters in the story of the Song of Ice and Fire, the one with the most mysterious and powerful magic was definitely not Melisandre, the red which who occupied most of the story. Instead, it was the first priestess of R'hllor. No one knew how long she had lived, and there were no books or rumors that recorded how she became the priestess of the Light King. The only thing that was known was that the Light King's religious system only began to spread with her appearance. "Oh, you know my name?" Kinvara raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Of course. Not only do I know your name, but I also know that you've been paying attention to Daenerys' movements. Can you tell me what you're doing in King's Landing instead of obediently waiting for the so-called child of prophecy in Volantis?" Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and probed. Kinvara gently stroked the ruby necklace around her neck and smiled as she replied, "Do you still need to ask? Isn't the truth right in front of you? I'm here to kill you. Don't worry, I'm very fast. You won't even have time to feel the pain before you die." "Ha ha ha. Kill me? Are you sure?" Zhang Cheng laughed wantonly. Perhaps a few hours ago, he would have needed to be cautious in such a situation to prevent his remaining arcane energy from running out. But now, not only did he have an abundance of new energy in his body, but he could also continuously absorb it from the surrounding air. Coupled with the various powerful damaging spells invented by the Magic Kingdom's Dalaran, it would not be a problem for him to destroy an army alone. Powerful. He had never been so sure that the power he possessed could defeat all the enemies that stood in his way. Perhaps in Magic Earth and Azeroth, his strength was only below average, but in the world of Song of Ice and Fire, no one could defeat him except for the huge dragon sealed underground and unable to leave. "Uh-huh. Looks like you haven't noticed it yet, have you?" Kinvara leaned forward slightly, with a mocking expression on his face. "What do you mean?" Zhang Cheng subconsciously felt that the situation was not right and immediately frowned. "Feel your body well and see if you can still use any interesting spells." Kinvara continued to remind him in a cat-and-mouse tone. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng hurriedly tried to extract the energy to form spells. However, the moment he extracted the energy, he suddenly realized that he could not control the energy stored in his body for some reason. It was as if something had cut off the connection between him and the energy. "Damn it! What did you do to me?" Zhang Cheng resisted the urge to pull out his magic sword and cut Kinvara in half. Ever since he obtained magic abilities, this was the first time he had lost the ability to cast spells. His heart was filled with nervousness and anxiety. Kinvara proudly shrugged his shoulders and said, "Nothing. I just added some special condiments to the bowl of soup you just drank. Remember, you must always be humble in front of the Light King. The power he possesses is something you will never be able to reach. All right, let's stop chatting. I'm going to kill you now. Don't misunderstand. From a personal point of view, there is no conflict between us, but you are an uncertain factor. I have to get rid of you to ensure that the prophecy will come true. It's not certain who's going to kill who. If you think that I'm a lamb waiting to be slaughtered after losing my magic, then you are gravely mistaken." Zhang Cheng slowly pulled out the Soul Reaper from his waist and prepared for battle. To be honest, if he could, he really did not want to release the full power of this magic sword. Every time he released it, he could clearly feel that his consciousness and way of thinking were moving in a darker direction. In other words, this sword would unknowingly corrode his soul, causing him to become even more vicious and evil. "No, you're wrong. I've never looked down on you. On the contrary, I value you greatly, so I specially brought a helper. After saying that, Kinvara gestured to the person blocking the other end of the alley. The latter did not say anything and immediately pulled out a fiery short sword and charged forward at an extremely fast speed. Because of his speed and the red cloak, his entire body was like a burning flame. "You're courting death." Zhang Cheng was not fooled by the fiery scene in front of him. He raised his sword and made a stabbing motion. He believed that the enemy's short sword was not as long as his, so if they were to clash, the first to be injured would be the enemy. But when the cloaked figure rushed in front of him, he realized how wrong he had been. The moment the soul-capturing envoy's razor-sharp sword pierced into his opponent's body, a blinding flame burst out. Then, the sword passed through his opponent's body without any hindrance at all. But the enemy's fiery short sword was getting closer and closer, heading straight for his weak throat. As a mage, Zhang Cheng quickly realized that the mysterious person in front of him was not a human, but an amalgamation of fire elements. He made a quick decision and did not choose to continue fighting. He rolled twice on the ground to avoid his vital parts. Even so, his shoulder was severely burned and emitted a charred smell. Chapter 177. How do you feel now? Do you feel no pain at all? Don't worry. It won't be long before the power from the heart of sacred flame completely purifies your body and soul. No one can interfere with the reincarnated Azur Ahai, and no one can stop him from completing the final prophecy. Kinvara raised his chin and declared victory in advance. "You've made a mistake, woman. A huge mistake that you can't bear." Zhang Cheng's face immediately turned gloomy as he felt the strange sensation from the burns. His two black eyes flickered with a chilling light. In particular, the black mist on the surface of the magic sword in his hand seemed to be getting denser and denser. Occasionally, he could even see the painful, distorted, and despairing faces. Since the souls of many dead had been turned into undead, the ability of Soul Reaper was no longer as simple as a sword. As long as the wielder was willing to make some kind of evil promise, the sword would immediately reward the wielder with incomparable strength, agility, and stamina. It could also release all the imprisoned undead in one go to attack indiscriminately, forming a land of death where not even a blade of grass could grow. Using King's Landing City as an example, Zhangqing only needed to kill all the residents within a few streets, and he would immediately obtain an undead army. Moreover, the profession level of a Dark Knight would also rapidly increase. Perhaps it was difficult for pure physical attacks to cause damage to elemental creatures, but undead were even better. They were completely composed of negative energy and were the mortal enemies of all positive energy creatures. Even fire was no exception. Kinvara clearly didn't know how terrifying a Soul Reaper was. He laughed and teased. "Mistake? No, I don't think I made a mistake. The one who made a mistake is you. You shouldn't have appeared, and you shouldn't have become a troublemaker. Perhaps you still don't know who gave me the information and who made Sansa start poison you. Please don't insult my intelligence. Currently, there's only one person in King's Landing City who can make Sansa listen to him, and that is Littlefinger Peter Baelish. It was clear that he had betrayed me, betrayed the alliance we had signed. But it doesn't matter. After dealing with you, I'll personally find him and let him understand the consequences of angering a powerful spellcaster. Bit by bit, I will make the scheme he has been plotting for years go bankrupt, and let him taste the pain of losing power, wealth, reputation, and status." As Zhang Cheng spoke, he gently cut open his palm and let the dark red blood flow down the blade. In the blink of an eye, the entire sword seemed to be boiling. It began to release an incomparably cold aura to the surroundings, and a thin layer of ice quickly formed on the surface of some puddles. "Oh, since you know what kind of person Baelish is, why did you choose to ally with him? In addition, Baelish wasn't the only one who betrayed you. Your other old friend, Varys, also betrayed you. If it wasn't for the help of his subordinates, it would have been quite troublesome for me to stop you." Kinvara clearly noticed this unusual change and cautiously took 2 steps back. "It's simple. Strictly speaking, I wasn't a qualified player in the Game of Thrones because I lacked patience and time, so I needed some help to quickly complete my plan. But it did not matter now. Neither Varus nor Baelish understood what it was that I sought, and thus had the misconception that I was the most dangerous enemy. Are you prepared to be responsible for the deaths of thousands of people? As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Chung suddenly raised his magic sword and promised loudly, "In the name of hatred and fear, I will offer the ultimate sacrifice to evil, my soul." In an instant, the two empty eyes of the skull mark at the end of the hilt shot out a terrifying green light without any warning. Before Kinvara could react to what was going on, a bone-chilling wailing sound began to surround the alleyway. Around 2 to 3 seconds later, translucent undead souls appeared out of thin air. They did not stop at all, passing through the walls as soon as they appeared and massacring the innocent residents one by one. What was even more terrifying was that after they killed their target, they would forcefully drag their target's soul back and stuff it into the skull mark. In less than half a minute, the soul would completely degenerate and become a new undead soul. After repeating this a few times, over 200 people on the street had silently died. There were no screams or howls, only deathly silence. Moreover, every death of a resident had a terrifying effect on the surrounding environment. This was especially so as the plants quickly withered and rotted, and the ground gave off an aura of despair and death. Even the rats and cockroaches, which are the most adaptable to the environment, crawled out from the corners and madly ran away. As for Zhang Chung, well, at this moment, he had completely joined the evil faction. If anyone cast a spell such as Detect Evil, they would immediately see a red to purple evil aura emanating from his body. Of course, after paying a huge price, he would naturally obtain great power. Even if he did not look at the parchment, he knew that his Dark Knight profession level had increased by a lot, and magic skills appeared in his mind one after another. Aura of Despair, Command Undead, Enchanted Weapon, Fear, Summon Hell's Servant. Just like the famous saying in the Forgotten Countries, when an evil person defected to a good person, they would not have a good ending. However, if a good person fell to evil, they would immediately obtain unimaginable benefits and power. Interesting. Are these the Dark Knight's abilities? No wonder so many powerful spellcasters would learn some fighting techniques in case of emergencies. So it turns out that they don't have anything better to do, but they want to be able to protect themselves in any situation. After all, the world is so big, and there are all sorts of schemes. Even the most cautious person will be distracted at times. The more abilities they have, the less flustered they will be when dealing with unexpected situations. Zhang Chung tightly gripped his magic sword, which continuously gave off a low hum, and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. Sensing the gloominess and despair in the air, Kinvara deeply breathed in and furiously roared, "Bastard! Do you know what you just done? You've sacrificed this land to the Light King's mortal enemy, the Frost God." "Umph. Of course I know what I'm doing. However, don't forget that this was all because of you. I can clearly tell you that if I feel that this is not enough to get rid of you, I will continue to kill even more people to obtain power, even if it means turning the entire King's Landing into a land of death." Zhang Chung coldly laughed as he replied. Chapter 178. Gloomy, despair, resentment. The sight of hundreds of undead gathered together was extremely terrifying, not to mention the heavily polluted land. Just the dark clouds in the sky that couldn't be dispelled by the sunlight and the rapidly falling temperature were constantly reminding everyone that something unusual was happening here. Several patrol squads tried to approach to see what was going on, but before they could even get close to the alley, they were surrounded and attacked by the undead. In the blink of an eye, they became another batch of victims. As more and more corpses fell at the intersection, even the most idiotic of fellows realized the danger. They all stopped in their tracks in fear and gathered together to discuss the secrets behind this strange scene and the bizarre deaths. However, they didn't understand that it wasn't just these few streets that were affected. The entire King's Landing city was now shrouded in the shadow of destruction. In fact, from the moment Zhang Chung voluntarily chose to join the evil faction, the originally fragile shackles of law and morality that bound his thoughts were completely broken. There was no longer any hesitation in his heart. As long as he could ensure his survival and obtain more power, he didn't care whether the world would be destroyed or whether the glorious civilization would wither away. After all, in his eyes, he was just a passing traveler who was constantly shuttling in a world that was both strange and familiar. Everything he experienced was just a game, a dangerous and exciting adventure. Why should he care about the values and outlook of an ordinary person? It should be known that things like law and morality were originally byproducts that were slowly derived from maintaining stable social relationships. As an outsider who was destined to not be able to integrate into society, he didn't need so-called friends, nor did he need any stable relationships. He only needed to use the simplest and fastest method to obtain what he needed. As for the destruction that would follow, or the devastating consequences, that wasn't something he should consider. Instead, it was something that every native of the world should consider. Kinvara, who had extremely rich life experiences, undoubtedly noticed the rapid change in his mental state. He frowned and asked, "Are you crazy? Don't you understand that once the frost god wins this eternal battle, the entire world will be shrouded in ice and snow? When that time comes, all living things will disappear. Your family, friends, and lovers will all die in this disaster. Even if you're lucky enough to survive, you will only be accompanied by loneliness and loneliness." Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. "I'm sorry, but you've got two things wrong. Firstly, I'm not interested in that bullshit story of the Light King and the Frost God fighting each other to rule the world. To be exact, I don't believe a single word of it, because in my opinion, there was no such thing as a god in this world. Even though I wasn't sure what the Light King was, he definitely wasn't a god. Secondly, I have no family, friends, or lovers. I have always been alone, so even if all the lives in the world were to die, it would have nothing to do with me. Alone? Aren't you going to marry that girl from House Tyrell soon? She's not your lover?" Kinvara was in disbelief. In her long years, she had seen all kinds of people. Some were greedy, some were humble, some were honest, and some were full of lies. But she had never seen a person who could endure loneliness for a long time. Even she needed to find a few lovers once in a while to relieve the pain of loneliness by venting her desires. No, it's not. You have to understand that marriage doesn't mean love. In my opinion, there is no such thing as love in this world. All the love between a man and a woman originates from the instinct to reproduce in the depths of the subconscious. As time passes, the physiological impulse brought about by the instinct to reproduce will slowly turn into a firm relationship of dependence. You can understand it as familial affection, but you can also understand it as habit. Moreover, to me, Ella is only a useful tool. Would you develop feelings for a tool you use? Zhang Cheng's eyes flickered with an inhuman light as he asked in return. Because he had completely unleashed the full power of the magic sword, countless crazed roars reverberated in his mind. In particular, the green energy emitted by the skull-shaped mark was constantly trying to influence and invade his consciousness. Don't be fooled by his smooth and logical speech. It was all a subconscious reaction, just like how someone would search for the ready-made answer through a search engine. Tool? You actually treat your fiancée as a tool. Kinvara was clearly shocked. It's not that I'm treating her as a tool. It's that House Tyrell sent her to me as a tool for a marriage alliance. I merely accepted it. All right, let's stop talking nonsense. Do you intend to continue resisting and turn the monarch's descends into a land of death? Or do you intend to obediently let me kill you? Zhang Cheng said as he slowly advanced with his sword. The undead army, floating in the air, followed closely behind. In the blink of an eye, they had completely surrounded the small alley. Affected by the dense negative energy, the cloaked elemental life form seemed to be seriously affected. Its body twitched incessantly, and small flames would occasionally spurt out from its face. It seemed like it could collapse at any time. Kinvara stared at the haze above his head that blocked the sunlight. He then took off the necklace on his neck and handed it to his helper. "Bring this back to the temple." Immediately, the elemental life form knelt on one knee and received the ruby necklace. It then dashed towards the exit of the alley. More than 10 undead that had just been transformed swarmed forward to intercept it. However, before they could even get close, a ball of bright flames erupted from its body and completely burned the cloak away, revealing a strange humanoid with red skin all over its body. All the undead that were burned by the flames screamed and turned into wisps of black smoke, disappearing forever. At the same time, Kinvara, who had lost the ruby necklace, her originally smooth and sexy skin rapidly sagged. In less than 5 seconds, large amounts of shocking wrinkles and age spots grew on her skin. She was so old that she looked like a shriveled corpse that had just crawled out of a coffin and had been dead for several years. Oh, interesting. Is this the ability that the Light King bestowed upon you? Or does that gem contain powerful magic that I've never seen before? Zhang Cheng carefully observed the inconceivable changes that had happened to the elemental life form. If there were any magic that had appeared in the story of the Song of Ice and Fire that left the deepest impression, the Light King's priest's ability to resurrect others and never age would definitely be at the top. It had to be known that even in a high magic world like the Azeroth continent, forcefully extending someone's life or resurrecting the dead would require a huge price to pay. Chapter 179. Please don't use your ignorance and arrogance against the great, our healer. He is the Radiant King, the creator of all heat and life in this world. Even the sun is one of his incarnations. You might possess many inconceivable abilities, but that's only at the level of mortals. You don't understand what our healer means to the entire world. Kinvara was like a devout believer, praising the God she believed in with a hoarse voice. Her eyes were filled with boundless respect, as if just mentioning his name would give her immense power. However, Zhang Cheng mocked with disdain. The sun is his incarnation? Are you trying to make me laugh? I even suspect that you don't even know what the sun is and created the so-called Radiant King based on your imagination. If he's really as omnipotent as you say, why does he watch as lies, slaughter, and deceit run rampant in this world? Why doesn't he use great power to create a better world? It's clear that he's either not as great as you say, or he's a complete evil god who would rather the world he created be in chaos. Shut up. What does an idiot like you know? The Radiant King isn't the only god. He has an opponent who's on par with him. Kinvara roared furiously. She might be able to tolerate contempt and humiliation towards herself, but she definitely couldn't tolerate anyone insulting our healer. You can continue to immerse yourself in your own fantasy. I only want to know if you've taken off the necklace with great magic power. Have you given up on struggling and prepared to die under my sword? Zhang Cheng gently waved the Soul Reaper that was constantly letting out low cries as he slowly approached her. At some point, the whites of his eyes had been covered by a dense black, and he seemed to be a nightmare that had walked out of the darkness. The undead, floating in the air, seemed to sense something, and all of them surged towards the skeleton-shaped sword hilt. In the blink of an eye, a black mist visible to the naked eye began to boil, revolving around Kinvara's aged body and tearing at it. It was as if it wanted to pull her soul out of her body. Kinvara didn't panic at all when she sensed the extremely evil negative energy corroding her soul. Instead, she smiled calmly. Do you know? As the first priest and follower of the Radiant King, I have something that other priests don't, and that's the Heart of Sacred Flame. If I activate it, I'll immediately obtain unparalleled power, but the price is my life. I never thought I'd have to use it one day, but it looks like I have to use it today. Just as she finished, suddenly, a dazzling red light burst out from her chest where her heart was. Following that, it expanded rapidly and finally exploded with a bang. Kinvara's body's body, Kinvara's body, and the Radiant's body's body. Kinvara's is his body, ants, SSS, SSS, SSS. Kinvara, S's, S's. My dear Granada, you've really stretched your claws. There is no doubt that the power Kinvara used was the same as the dragon that the Valyrians had imprisoned beneath the island. That was especially so for spells related to fire. Be it the control of energy or spell formation, everything was the same. It was clear that either Granada had used his ability to create illusions and dreams to silently influence Kinvara, just like how he had influenced the Targaryen family, or Kinvara had discovered the island by chance and seen the powerful dragon with his own eyes, prostrating himself at the dragon's feet. After all, from her point of view, this colossus from another world was no different from a god. How is it? Have you seen the great power of our healer? Kinvara raised her flaming arms and boasted loudly. Due to the high concentration of fire elemental energy, everything within a radius of 10 meters around her had turned into magma. Great? I'm sorry, but I really can't see what's so great about controlling fire. If you hadn't poisoned me, I could have easily done it myself. Although it's a little rude to say this, I still have to say it. If this is your final trump card, then I'll be very disappointed. In my disappointment, I'll do something a little overboard. For example, I'll use your soul to upgrade this sort of little. Zhang Cheng's Kinvara says, and he immediately lost interest in continuing the conversation. Perhaps in the eyes of many natives, Kinvara, who transformed into a fire elemental, was almost undefeatable. However, in his eyes, she was only a little troublesome. Indeed, the elemental form was immune to physical attacks, but the problem was that the Soul Harvester was never a simple longsword. Not to mention the enchantment level of the material. Just the negative energy emitted from the surface was enough to cause fatal damage to elemental life forms. Negative energy, as the name implied, was the opposite of life and heat. It was somewhat similar to a black hole in the universe. Once it seeped into the body of a living being, it would frantically corrode the life form's strength before slowly expanding. When this black hole finally reached a certain extent, the life form would rapidly undergo an irreversible transformation from the inside to the outside, becoming the often mentioned undead creatures such as zombies, skeletons, vampires, and so on. Ha! Do you think a mere sword can hurt me? No. The great are healers, will purify you, purify your filthy and evil soul. Kinvara roared as she swung her arm down. She, who knew nothing about the power of the magic sword, had no intention of dodging. She allowed the Soul Harvester's sword to pass through her body. Woo-woo-woo. The moment the tip of the sword came into contact with the magma body, the skull-shaped ornament suddenly spewed out a large amount of dark green light. Kinvara's burning body collapsed in the next second. The scorching flames were like an epiphyllum, erupting into a magnificent firework. Then they scattered in all directions and disappeared without a trace. As for her soul, it remained in place with an expression of disbelief, staring at the black hole in her chest that was getting bigger and bigger. About a minute or two later, she suddenly let out an ear-piercing scream without any warning. Along with the scream, the magic sword began to vibrate, as if the two were resonating with each other. When the scream completely stopped, Kinvara's soul had completely disappeared without a trace, as if it had never existed. Zhang Cheng gently stroked the skull-shaped symbol on the Soul Harvester's hilt and asked with a smile, "What do you feel now?" "Great. Respected master, you're the most evil master I have ever seen, the one with the most potential. Thanks to you, I finally have my own consciousness. Please sacrifice more and stronger souls to me. In return, I will provide you with more power other than magic." Although the Soul Catcher had all kinds of shortcomings, and could even be said to be extremely dangerous, it could play an irreplaceable role at a critical moment. At least, there were no good substitutes for it at this stage. After figuring this out, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but show a helpless expression. "Well, I have to admit that what you said makes sense. What's more, I'm a person who pursues power, and the stronger the power, the more dangerous it is. It's impossible for me to retreat whenever I encounter danger. Now, tell me the story of your previous masters. I really want to know where they came from and why they were inexplicably chosen." "Hee, you are very smart, smarter than all of my previous masters combined. I believe that you will definitely go further than them. As for the story of my previous masters, I have forgotten most of them. However, I still have some impression of your previous master. She was a woman with an ordinary appearance and a strange way of thinking. She liked to stand on the moral high ground before killing, and then use a high and mighty attitude to judge. I really don't understand. As an executioner who has slaughtered thousands of lives, how did she maintain that kind of self-righteous feeling, as if only her values in the world were righteous and the rest were all evil? Of course, I quite liked the time I spent with her, especially when she started a massacre in the name of justice. It simply made me extremely excited. But later on, I don't know why, but she suddenly began to doubt herself, criticize herself, and finally developed to the point where she wanted to atone for her sins. I was tired of her self-pity and her disgusting hypocrisy. I used day and night to question her until she completely went crazy. After she committed suicide, I devoured her soul. When it mentioned its previous master, the demon sword's tone suddenly became full of sarcasm. It was as if in its eyes, killing a master who didn't meet its standards was as natural as eating when one was hungry or drinking when one was thirsty. Then, does she also have a strange parchment? Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and probed. His focus was clearly not on the other party's gender or behavior, but whether the other party was like him, chosen by the owner of the parchment. The demon sword was silent for a moment before it quickly replied, "Yes. She also has a strange parchment. To be precise, every master of mine has a parchment. Every time they complete a mission given on it, they will receive a corresponding reward or reward." Interesting, so I'm not the first, and it's very likely that I won't be the last. Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and muttered to himself. According to the information revealed by the soul capturing envoy, the owner of the parchment was clearly planning something in secret, constantly picking out little white mice. As for what the purpose was, it was still unknown. Respected master, what do you plan to do next? If not, why don't you listen to my suggestion? Seeing that Zhang Cheng was standing in the same place for a long time without any reaction, the demon sword began to try to take the initiative. Suggestion? You can give suggestions? Zhang Cheng stared at the skull-shaped decoration on the sword hilt and sneered. He was not an idiot, so he naturally understood what this demon sword wanted to do. Of course. Don't you think that there are a little too many humans in this city? Why don't you let me kill half of them and turn them into undead? This way, the remaining half will obediently submit to you out of fear. Then, you can use them to build a powerful and brutal army. Together with my strength, it won't be a problem to conquer the entire world. The soul-capturing envoy was indeed the special weapon of the Dark Guardians. The moment it spoke, it was closely associated with evil, slaughter, and tyranny. However, Zhang Cheng was obviously not interested in this at all. Without thinking, he refuted, "Conquer the world? Is there something wrong with your brain? I almost forgot, you don't have a brain at all. Tell me first, what benefits do I get from conquering the world? Money? Power? Women? Sorry, I'm not interested in any of these. I only have one goal, and that is knowledge and power. Do you understand?" Chapter 181. At the docks of King's Landing City, a small boat was quietly docked on the plank road. Beside the boat, Peter Baelish was looking at his old friend and competitor. He asked in an uncertain tone, "My dear Varys, are you sure you want to leave at this critical moment? Don't you want to see the end of that self-righteous bastard with your own eyes? You should know that not every victory will bring you indescribable pleasure like defeating a powerful enemy. I think you should learn to enjoy it." "No, my lord, I've never enjoyed such things. Do you know, the biggest difference between us is that I will always remain cautious no matter what the situation is. You, on the other hand, tend to get carried away when you think you're about to win. Please believe me when I say that this is not a good habit. Furthermore, what happened today is not something you and I are best at. To be on the safe side, it's better for me to leave for a while and lie low for a while." With that, the fat eunuch bowed slightly and covered his face with his hood. He boarded the boat and waved his hand. After receiving the order, the sailor immediately began rowing with all his might. In the blink of an eye, the boat had left the docks and slowly disappeared into the distance. Watching the boat gradually disappear into the distance, Littlefinger smiled and shook his head. He muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "You're right. There are differences between us, But the real difference is that you only know how to hide in the dark like a spider. Once you're exposed to the sun, you'll be easily eliminated. But I'm different. I have a noble status that you don't have. Sooner or later, I'll have to stand under the sun and taste the sweetness of power. Without a doubt, he didn't feel that Varys was his equal from the start. After all, the foundation of Westeros's rule was the nobility. If someone wanted to seize power in this land, the first hurdle was to obtain the status of a noble. Unfortunately, although Varys was the head of intelligence in the palace and knew countless secrets, he couldn't obtain a noble title due to his handicapped body. The nobles couldn't tolerate a eunuch as their own kind, so they were destined to be like vines and plants, attaching themselves to others to obtain the nutrients they needed to survive. This also meant that he couldn't directly control power. He could only participate in the game of power with the help of others. However, Peter Baelish was different. He was born into a small noble family, and now that he had obtained the title of Count of Harlenberg, he had gained the recognition of all the nobles in terms of status. Perhaps some people would despise his background and shallow family background, but they would not question his qualifications to participate in the game of power. Every time he thought of this, a strong sense of superiority would surge in Littlefinger's heart. Coupled with the fact that the biggest threat to him was about to be eradicated, he became inexplicably excited. To reward himself for all the energy he had expended, he decided that he would eat the young and beautiful Sansa Stark today to satisfy his years-long desire for Catelyn Tully. As the saying goes, the best things are always unobtainable. Who would have thought that a youthful and ignorant love would eventually become the motivation for a man to fight for his whole life? Of course, this motivation wasn't because of love, but because he couldn't tolerate having the thing he wanted snatched away from him. Fortunately, he had finally found a replacement to satisfy his previous regret. Furthermore, this replacement was younger and prettier than the original one. Baelish planned to take advantage of the situation. First have Sansa pregnant with his child, and then marry her to Robert Arryn. This way, after the sickly Robert Arryn died in an accident, he could use Sansa and the child in her belly to secretly control the valley. When the time was right, he would ask for a marriage alliance as the Count of Harlenberg and rightfully obtain the right to rule the valley. In fact, according to the original plan, he had intended to marry Lisa Tully, but Zhang Cheng's violent revenge had ruined everything. Littlefinger quickly returned to the brothel on Silk Street with a sense of anticipation. As soon as he walked in, the woman waiting at the door took 2 steps forward and reported in a low voice, "My lord, your lovely little lamb has been waiting in the room upstairs for some time. As you instructed, I added something to her wine to liven things up. It should have taken effect soon." Well done. Remember, no matter what happens, do not disturb me before dawn tomorrow, understood? Baelish reminded with a smirk. Understood. I promise I won't let anyone spoil your mood. The woman hurriedly bowed and gave her promise. Perhaps in the eyes of outsiders, Littlefinger had always been a harmless figure, but she knew very well how dangerous her master was. Many new girls had accidentally angered Littlefinger, and as a result, they had mysteriously disappeared. A few days later, their tortured corpses would appear on the beach by the sea. Baelish quickly walked through the noisy hall to the innermost room on the 2nd floor. As soon as he opened the door, he noticed Sansa sitting on a chair with her legs tightly clamped together. Her face was red and she was panting, her blue eyes slightly unfocused. Obviously, no matter what was added to the wine, it was starting to take effect. "My dear, what's wrong?" Littlefinger pretended to be concerned and went forward to support her. However, when he was supporting her, one of his hands inadvertently touched the girl's round buttocks, causing the sensitive girl to tremble involuntarily. I don't know. Sansa's face was filled with fear and unease. She had never tasted the forbidden fruit before, so she didn't realize what was happening to her body. She also didn't realize that this seemingly friendly, strange uncle would do something to her. I think it's because you drank too much wine. Come, lie down and rest for a while." As he spoke, Baelish carried the girl in his arms and walked towards the large bed not far away. Just as he put Sansa down and took off the girl's boots and clothes, The door was suddenly kicked open with a bang. Interrupted at the crucial moment, he immediately cursed without turning his head. Damn it! Didn't I say that, no matter what happened, don't disturb me before dawn? I'm sorry to disturb you, but I have a score to settle with you right now. Accompanied by a familiar voice, Zhang Cheng's figure suddenly appeared at the door of the room, his eyes filled with coldness. Why are you here? Seeing the person who should have been dead standing in front of him, Baelish was so frightened that all his desires disappeared. He subconsciously wanted to turn around and look for a window or something to escape. Unfortunately, in order to keep this a secret, there were no windows in this room. There was only a secret door that led to the escape tunnel, and the entrance to the tunnel was under the bed. Chapter 182. What? Am I so worthless in your eyes that you think a priestess of the Light King can kill me? Zhang Cheng sneered as he kicked away the corpse of the woman who tried to stop him in the hallway and closed the door behind him. Even though he had predicted that Littlefinger would one day break the agreement and attack him, he had underestimated Littlefinger's growing ambition and his innate willingness to take risks. According to his initial judgment, the agreement between the three of them should have lasted until Baelish took complete control of the valley. Who would have thought that Littlefinger would not play by the rules at all? He did not consider the consequences of failure at all. He had even cleverly taken advantage of Sansa and Tyrion's relationship as husband and wife. Zhang Cheng had never lacked caution. When he was with people like Varys and Littlefinger, he would never touch the food or wine they prepared. However, the imp was obviously not the kind of person who would use poison. That was why he had let his guard down and ignored Sansa, a girl who was both stupid and easily manipulated. You're still alive. Does that mean Kinvara failed? She's dead. Baelish's face was filled with disbelief. He could not believe that Kinvara, the priestess of the Light King, who was many times more powerful than Red Witch Melisandre, would die at the hands of this unknown person. Zhang Cheng casually pulled a chair over and sat down unhurriedly. Then he replied in a sarcastic tone, Yes. Do you think I would have given her a second chance otherwise? No, I have always been serious when dealing with my enemies. I never change my attitude because of their gender, age, or background. Also, do you know what your biggest mistake was? It was not your growing ambition or the inferiority behind it. It was your lack of understanding of the power of magic. It was this lack of understanding that caused you to make the wrong decision. Now, tell me, do you have any last words? Wait. Baelish's pupils shrank when he heard the word last words. He quickly took a few steps back and shouted loudly. Oh, after committing such a blatant act of betrayal, you still expect me to let you go? Zhang Cheng saw through the other party's intentions at a glance, and the corners of his mouth curled up to reveal an undisguised mockery. To be honest, on the way here, he was still thinking about how to torture Littlefinger, but after seeing him with his own eyes, he didn't have such a strong desire for revenge. He didn't know if it was an illusion or not, but as he killed more and more people, he began to treat life and death lightly. Not only could he watch the lives disappear one by one, but he could also calmly accept that he would be killed by others at some point in the future. After all, whether it was the natural world or the so-called civilized society, it was essentially a game between the hunter and the prey. No one could guarantee that they would always be the hunter and not the prey. The only thing he could do was to learn to adapt to it, and even enjoy the feeling of having his life hanging by a thread. Don't you want to know what kind of role Varys played in this matter, and where he is hiding now? Peter Belisai asked after taking a deep breath. He clearly knew what he had to say to save his own life, so he didn't hesitate to betray his accomplice. After all, betrayal was a walk in the park for him, and there were no psychological or moral barriers to it. Looking at the strong desire to live in Belisai's eyes, Zhang Cheng suddenly laughed. He sighed as he laughed. My dear Count, you really are a person who doesn't give up hope easily. All right, then I'll listen to what interesting things you have to say to dispel my thoughts of killing you. Realizing that his life wasn't in immediate danger, Belisai's tensed nerves relaxed a little. He didn't even look at Sansa, who was in a daze and moaning from time to time, and explained in a sincere tone, You might not believe it, but the plan to kill you wasn't proposed by me, but by Varys. He has always had a secret with the high-ranking priests of the Light King, and only he could persuade Kinvara to cross the sea to deal with you. Ha ha, so you're saying that you were accidentally dragged into this? Zhangqing couldn't help but laugh out loud. He had always thought that Littlefinger was a person with a bottom line, but it seemed that he was wrong. Littlefinger was far more shameless than he imagined. No, I won't deny that I wanted to kill you, nor will I deny that I was involved. What I want to say is that I don't pose much of a threat to you. The real threat is our mutual friend, Varys. Also, half an hour ago, he seemed to have predicted Kinvara's failure and secretly left King's Landing for Ursos. No one but me knew where he had gone. Think about it. Do you want to kill me and let the one who deserves to die escape? Or do you want me to help you find Varys? With that, Belisai decisively shut his mouth and clenched his fists, patiently waiting for a reply. Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and thought for a moment before nodding. I have to admit that you have a point. Perhaps Varys didn't plan this attack to kill me, but to use me to kill you and Kinvara. From a certain point of view, he is far more of a threat than you are. Because what you desire in your heart is to obtain power, not to hide in a dark corner and live a lowly life like a mouse. But he is different. He is someone who is used to living in the shadows. If he escapes, it will be troublesome in the future. A wise choice. I have learned my lesson. I will never dare to be your enemy again. Belisai hurriedly knelt on one knee and solemnly swore an oath. Oath? Haha, no, Count. I have never believed in oaths. There is a saying in my hometown. The reason people sign a contract is to tear it apart in the future. The reason people make oaths is to betray it in the future. If I'm not wrong, you have probably made countless oaths. Please tell me, when have you ever kept them? Zhang Qing questioned mercilessly. Then what do I have to do to make you believe me? Belisai raised his head and looked straight into Zhang Cheng's eyes. Chapter 183. Blood magic, as the name suggested, was a special type of magic that was performed through fresh blood. According to Cronada's description, as blood contained fragments of the soul, it could be used to curse, restrain, or even force someone to submit to one's will. It could even be used as a medium to summon terrifying monsters. Shadow magic was a branch of blood magic. In the beginning, Zhang Cheng had always thought that the blood magic in the Song of Ice and Fire was very similar to the curses used by the warlocks of Azeroth. But in fact, although the two had some similarities, their essence was completely different. The essence of the warlocks was to see themselves as a door, a channel that connected the Burning Legion, dark energy, and shadow energy. They used this channel to perform all kinds of spells. In other words, their power did not depend on how much energy they had stored in their body or how strong the resonance was during the casting process. They only needed to expand the channel enough to allow more and more powerful energy and demons to pass through. The blood magic in the Song of Ice and Fire relied heavily on the energy stored in the caster's body, especially shadow magic and death curses. Every time they were used, they had to pay a huge price. Of course, Zhang Cheng's understanding of blood magic was still at the theoretical stage, so he could not perform too advanced and complicated spells. But he did not need to use too advanced spells to deal with an ordinary person. As a drop of blood was injected with energy, a lifelike image of a ferocious monster formed on the back of Littlefinger's hand in the blink of an eye. Feeling the deep malice in the image, Baelish could not help but shiver. He asked in an uncertain tone, "What is this?" "Nothing. I extracted power from the dark side of your soul and created an interesting little thing. But don't worry, as long as I don't take the initiative to awaken it, it will stay asleep." Zhang Cheng gave the answer with a smile. "What if it is awakened?" Littlefinger frowned and continued to ask. Obviously, he was not satisfied with the explanation just now. To be precise, he wanted to know what the worst outcome would be. "Haha, do you still remember how Renly died?" Zhang Cheng pursed his lips, a meaningful light in his eyes. "You mean, if it's awakened, a terrifying shadow killer will appear?" It was unknown whether it was due to nervousness or anger, but Baelish's voice was raised an octave, and his other hand hidden under his robe clenched into a fist. Zhang Cheng deliberately pretended not to see the intense reaction of the other party. He shrugged indifferently and said, "Probably. I only know that it will appear in the form of a shadow. As for whether he was an assassin or something else, it was unknown. After all, you're the only one who knows the dark side of your heart the best, right? My dear Count, I sincerely advise you to consider whether you have the ability to bear the consequences before making any foolish decisions. This time, I guarantee that your sister won't have the chance to escape. As you wish, my honored master. Baelish, who was kneeling on one knee, bowed his head deeply in order to make himself look more humble. However, he was the only one who knew what was going through his mind at the moment. For an ambitious and scheming schemer like Littlefinger, it was impossible for him to wholeheartedly submit to someone. He would always hide in the dark and plot one scheme after another until he kicked away all the obstacles blocking his path to power. Regarding this point, Zhang Cheng was quite clear, but he had the confidence to control and use this dangerous and useful chess piece. At the same time, it was also a form of training for his ability to control his subordinates. According to the style of the owner of the parchment scroll, since the other party gave him a mission to train his tactics, then he would definitely use this ability at a certain point in the future. Although he had always been wary of that mysterious parchment scroll, he never denied that it played a guiding role in his growth. Looking at Littlefinger, who was kneeling in front of him, Zhang Cheng crossed his arms in front of his chest and said straightforwardly, "I know that you were lying to me when you said you knew Varys' whereabouts. The eight-clawed spider would never reveal his whereabouts to anyone. But it's fine. I'll give you 3 days to investigate. If you don't have an accurate answer after 3 days, I'll let you know the painful price of lying to me. Remember, don't try to escape or hide. Even if you run to the end of the sea, I can activate this interesting little thing with just a thought." After saying that, he reached out his finger and lightly touched the sinister pattern. Instantly, a wisp of black shadow leaked out from the middle of the pattern and flowed up along the blood vessels. In less than a second, the blood vessels on the entire arm were pitch black, like wriggling worms. At the same time, Baelish bit his lips as if he was fighting against something. His forehead was covered in sweat. Fortunately, the moment the black blood was about to enter his heart, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Asterisk snap. Asterisk with a crisp sound. The black blood that filled the blood vessels quickly retracted into the pattern. If it wasn't for the fact that he was lying on the ground panting, Littlefinger would have suspected that he was hallucinating. After resting for a few seconds, he hurriedly got up from the ground and shook the dust off his knees. He suppressed the fear in his heart and bowed respectfully. "Please rest assured, I will find Varys' whereabouts within 3 days. Then what are you waiting for? Go quickly. It just so happens that I'm a little tired and need to rest and relax a little." Zhang Cheng deliberately pretended to be impatient and waved his hand. At the same time, he looked at Sansa, who was lying on the bed and writhing her body. He didn't know what drug she had been given, but the girl had fallen into a fantasy of desire and was unable to extricate herself. She even completely ignored the 2 men in the room and rubbed several of her most sensitive parts. "I wish you and Miss Stark a wonderful night." Baelish hurriedly bowed his head again and quickly turned to leave the room. He was afraid that if he stayed any longer, the most fragile nerve in his head would suddenly snap, and he would do something stupid that could not be salvaged. After all, the most important reason why he decided to embark on the road of power was that the woman he loved had been taken away by another man. Now, the familiar scene was playing out again. His anger and humiliation were like a volcano full of magma, ready to erupt at any time. Listening to the sound of footsteps gradually fading away in the corridor, Zhang Cheng, who was sitting on the chair, suddenly laughed without warning. As he laughed, he teased, "Don't worry, my dear Baelish, this is only the beginning. I will take away the things you cherish most one by one and immerse you in the abyss of pain. So now, what should I do with you, Sansa Stark? P.S. Follow the official WeChat account. Limiox's 666. Chapter 184. Kisses, caresses, indescribable excitement. By the time Sansa woke up from her endless fantasies, the sky outside was already shrouded in darkness. Aside from the sounds of men and women moaning from downstairs, There was only the rustling sound of quill brushing against paper. As a girl who had tasted the pleasure of sex for the first time, her heart was filled with a strong sense of shame and fear of reality. She didn't even have the courage to open her eyes to see who was in the same room with her. After all, she was Tyrion's wife in name. But now, she was in a brothel, having unspeakable sex with another man. Most importantly, she didn't know why she didn't choose to resist during this process. Instead, she enjoyed it very much and took the initiative, especially her messy clothes, as well as the large water stains on her clothes, all of which indicated that she had already become the kind of woman that he despised and looked down upon the most. But just as Sansa began to wonder if she should continue to sleep or open her eyes to face reality, she suddenly heard a strange sound. It sounded like some kind of chanting, but it also sounded like a strange language that was hard to understand. In short, driven by curiosity, she opened her originally closed eyes slightly. Immediately, she found a young man with his back facing her, constantly waving his right hand to release a strange black smoke. At the same time, he was mumbling something. As the chanting got faster and faster, the black smoke seemed to be given life and gradually condensed into a nightmarish entity. The girl, who had never seen such a terrifying sight before, could not help but scream. My dear Lady Stark, you're awake? Zhang Chung, who was obsessed with shadow magic, immediately turned around with a half-smile on his face. He did not take the shadow monster seriously at all. Lord Mason, how could it be you? When she saw the man's face, Sansa's face alternated between red and white. It was a sight to behold. Looking at the girl's panicked reaction, Zhang Chung chuckled and shrugged. Who else could it be if not me? Are you looking forward to seeing Count Peter Belize when you wake up? No, that's not what I meant. Sansa couldn't help but shudder when she recalled Littlefinger's old face. She quickly shook her head. She had always yearned for a perfect love and marriage between a prince and a princess. How could she be willing to have anything to do with an old man who was almost the same as her father? Oh, then what do you mean? I really want to know what kind of promise Baelish gave you to make you willing to poison him. Zhang Chung rubbed his chin as he asked with interest. To be honest, he still couldn't figure out what was in this young lady's head. She didn't learn her lesson even after being used by others time and time again. Even Joffrey could play her in the palm of his hand. I am very, very sorry. I really want to go home. You might not know this, but ever since news of the bloody wedding reached King's Landing, I've been having nightmares every night. Furthermore, Joffrey is constantly looking for opportunities to torment me. If I continue to stay here, I'll go crazy. Also, Count Peter promised that those things would not endanger your life. Sansa explained nervously. It was obvious that the shadow monster, which was temporarily given life, was a huge blow to her fragile heart. Zhang Chung pretended not to notice this. He smiled and sighed as he said, so he only used a verbal promise that he wasn't sure if he could fulfill in exchange for you risking your life? Besides, do you know that Winterfell is in the hands of the Bolton family? Even if you return, what can you do? Being forced to marry Ramus Bolton to increase the legitimacy of the Bolton family as the guardian of the Northern Territory? Most importantly, do you know why you're lying on the bed with your clothes half naked? With a series of hints, Sansa went into deep thought. After a full minute, she lifted her head and asked in an uncertain tone, Did we, Please don't misunderstand. Nothing happened between us. To be precise, you were the only one who was tossing and turning in bed. I only enjoyed it for a while. Let me give you a small reminder. Try to imagine what happened before you fell into a trance. Then, you'll understand how it all happened. After saying this, Zhang Chung immediately shut his mouth and patiently waited for the other party to recall the information. Before I fell into a trance? Sansa bit her lower lip and tried to recall. After 30 seconds, her expression changed drastically. She clutched her face and exclaimed in shock, It's Count Belize? Your memory is good. You managed to recall it so quickly. That's right. It's our dear Count, who's also the owner of this brothel. He secretly mixed some interesting things into your wine. As he spoke, Zhang Chung casually picked up the half-empty bottle on the table and gently shook it. According to my tests, This is a mucus secreted by a deep-sea shell creature. It's very rare and precious. It's used to stimulate the secretion of hormones in a woman's body. When the hormones in a woman's body reach a certain level, she will involuntarily enter a state of estrus, just like you did a few hours ago. In the distant East Main Road, there are many rich women who use this thing to increase the pleasure between the sheets. Why did Count Belize do this? Sansa asked loudly, trembling all over. She couldn't believe that Littlefinger, whom she had once regarded as an elder, would do such a shameless thing. Zhang Cheng put down the wine bottle and replied with a smile, "Is it strange? You know, he was madly infatuated with your mother back then. At the same time, he maintained an unspeakable intimate relationship with your aunt. Now, as you become more mature and more like your mother when she was young, it will naturally arouse the desire hidden in the depths of his heart. You have to understand that for a man, a woman he can't get is the best. Apart from that, you're the only confirmed survivor of Stark. Whoever gets you will have the support of countless nobles in the Northern Territory. Think about it. What reason would Count Belize have to let you go? So his promises were all lies, right?" Sansa seemed to have suddenly been enlightened, and her emotions began to become particularly agitated.